The Irish sea roared, hurling frothy waves against the jagged cliffs where St. Agatha's convent stood, a Gothic relic clinging to the edge of the world. Its spires, weathered by centuries, stabbed through the fog, as if pleading for salvation yet bound by an unseen curse. The night was ink black, save for a single flickering light in a high tower window, where a candle trembled against the wind. Inside the convent's frigid chapel, Sister Mary Clare knelt on the stone floor, her pale hands clasped tightly. Her green eyes, shadowed with unease, flickered toward the massive crucifix above the altar. The carved Christ seemed to stare back, its wooden gaze heavy with judgment. She whispered her prayers, but her voice faltered. "Domin, libera me," the words caught in her throat as a faint scratching sound slithered from behind the altar, like claws dragging across stone. Mary Clare froze. The other nuns, veiled and silent, continued their prayers, oblivious. The scratching grew louder, rhythmic, insistent. Her heart pounded, but she dared not move. The air thickened with the scent of incense and something else, something metallic, like blood. A whisper, soft and feminine, curled through the darkness. "Mary!" She gasped, her prayer book slipping from her hands. The sound echoed, now a chorus of voices, overlapping, anguished, as if trapped within the walls. The candles on the altar flickered violently, casting warped shadows that danced like specters. Mary Clare's gaze darted to the shadows, where a figure seemed to form, a woman in a tattered veil, her face obscured. The figure moved, gliding closer, and Mary Clare's scream lodged in her throat as the chapel plunged into darkness. When the candles flared back to life, the figure was gone. The nuns looked up, startled, but saw nothing amiss. Mary Clare's hands trembled as she retrieved her book, her mind racing. It's her again. The woman in the walls. She had heard the whispers before, felt the eyes watching her in the dead of night. But tonight, they were louder, closer, as if something had awakened. As the nuns filed out, Mary Clare lingered, her eyes fixed on the altar. The scratching had stopped, but the air felt heavy, alive. She approached the altar, her fingers brushing the cold stone. A faint crack ran through it, barely visible, as if something had clawed its way out from within. She backed away, her breath shallow, and fled the chapel, the whispers trailing her like a shadow. Morning broke over St. Agatha's, grey and oppressive, the sun smothered by clouds. In the refectory, the nuns sat in rows, their spoons clinking against bowls of thin porridge. Silence was law here, broken only by the creak of the ancient wooden beams overhead. Sister Mary Clare's seat was empty, her absence a silent scream in the room. Sister Ruth, her narrow face pinched with worry, glanced at Sister Lucia across the table. Ruth's fingers twitched, crumpling her napkin. "She didn't come back from the chapel last night," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Lucia, older and pragmatic, shot her a warning look. "Hush! You'll stir trouble." The heavy oak door swung open, and Mother Agnes entered, her black habit sweeping the floor like a storm cloud. Her face, carved from granite, surveyed the room with cold authority. The nuns straightened, their spoons pausing mid-air. "Sister Mary Clare is unwell," Agnes announced, her voice sharp as a blade. "She is confined to her cell. No one is to disturb her." Ruth's eyes darted to Lucia, doubt flickering. Lucia's lips tightened, but she said nothing. The nuns resumed eating, the clinks louder now, as if to drown out the questions hanging in the air. Ruth's mind churned. She had seen Mary Clare last night, slipping out of the dormitory with a lantern, her face pale but determined. She went to the crypt, Ruth thought, her stomach twisting. Something's wrong. In Mary Clare's cell, the young nun lay on a narrow cot, her skin clammy, her breath shallow. Bruises circled her wrists, faint but unmistakable, as if she'd been bound. She muttered in her sleep, fragments of Latin mixed with cries. "She's coming, libera me." A shadow passed over her, unseen, and the air grew colder. The wooden cross above her bed tilted slightly, as if nudged by an invisible hand. Back in the refectory, Ruth's unease grew. She remembered the stories whispered among the novices, tales of nuns who vanished, their names erased from the convent's records. Mother Agnes had always dismissed them as gossip, but Ruth had seen things, flickering lights in the crypt, footsteps in empty halls. And now Mary Clare, the only one brave enough to speak of the noises, was unwell. Ruth's resolve hardened. She would find her friend, no matter the cost. As the nuns dispersed, Ruth lingered, slipping a crust of bread into her sleeve. She would need strength for what lay ahead. The convent's walls seemed to watch her, their stones whispering secrets she wasn't ready to hear. Night fell again, the wind howling like a banshee. Mary Clare, awake now, sat huddled in her cell, her eyes wide with fear. The bruises on her wrists dropped, but she couldn't remember how they got there. Her dreams had been vivid, suffocating, visions of a woman with hollow eyes, her veil dripping with blood, beckoning her toward a dark well. "Find me," the woman had whispered. "Free me." Unable to bear the confinement, Mary Clare slipped from her cell, her bare feet silent on the stone floor. She clutched a stolen lantern, its weak flame trembling as she crept through the dormitory. The convent was a labyrinth of shadows, each corner hiding eyes that weren't there. She reached the heavy iron door to the crypt, its surface etched with faded crosses. Her hand hesitated on the rusted handle, but the whispers in her mind urged her forward. The door groaned open, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of earth and decay. Mary Clare's lantern cast flickering shadows on the walls, where ancient tombs loomed, their inscriptions worn to illegibility. She moved deeper, her breath hitching as the whispers returned, louder now, a chorus of women crying out in pain. At the crypt's heart, she found a sealed tomb, its stone slab cracked and stained. The lantern's light revealed scratches on the surface, deep and frantic, as if someone had tried to claw their way out. Mary Clare's fingers traced the marks, her heart racing. The whispers grew deafening, and the lantern flickered out, plunging her into blackness. "Mary," the voice was close, behind her. She spun, but saw nothing. Then, a cold hand brushed her neck, and she stumbled back, her scream echoing off the walls. The lantern flared back to life, revealing a figure at the edge of the light, a woman in a tattered habit, her face half-rotted, her eyes glowing like embers. "You hear me?" the figure hissed. "You will free me." Mary Clare ran, her lantern swinging wildly. She tripped on the stairs, the light shattering as she fell. Darkness swallowed her, and the last thing she heard was the figure's laughter, sharp and cruel, as the crypt seemed to close in around her. The dawn was a bruise on the horizon, its dim light barely penetrating the fog that clung to St. Agatha's convent. The cliffs below roared with the restless sea, their jagged edges a warning to any who dared approach. Hooves clattered on the uneven path, and a lone rider emerged from the mist, Father Gabriel, his broad shoulders hunched against the wind, his dark eyes scanning the convent's looming silhouette. His leather satchel, slung across his chest, bulged with books and a silver cross that glinted faintly in the gloom. He dismounted, tethering his horse to a gnarled tree, and stood for a moment, as if sensing the weight of the place. Inside, Mother Agnes sat in her office, a cavernous room lined with shelves of dusty ledgers. Her fingers traced the pages of one, her lips moving silently, as if reciting a prayer, or a curse. A sharp knock broke her focus. Sister Lucia entered, her face taut. "A priest has arrived, Mother. From the Vatican. He demands an audience." Agnes's eyes narrowed, but her voice was smooth as ice. "Show him in." Gabriel strode into the room, his boots echoing on the stone floor. He carried himself like a soldier, not a priest, his jaw set, his gaze unflinching. "Mother Agnes," he said, his voice low but firm. "I'm Father Gabriel, sent by the Holy See. There have been reports, disappearances, disturbances. I'm here to investigate." Agnes rose, her black habit rustling like dry leaves. "Gossip," she said, her smile thin. "The imaginations of idle novices. St. Agatha's is a house of God, Father. You'll find nothing amiss." Gabriel's eyes flicked to the ledger on her desk, its pages yellowed and curled. "Then you won't mind if I look around. The Vatican insists on thoroughness." The air crackled with unspoken tension. Agnes's fingers tightened on the edge of her desk, but she nodded. "Of course. But tread carefully, Father. Some truths are better left buried." As Gabriel turned to leave, he caught sight of a faded tapestry on the wall, a depiction of a well, surrounded by veiled figures, their hands raised in supplication. The image stirred something in him, a memory of whispered warnings from his mentor in Rome: "Beware the places built on old wounds." He shook it off and stepped into the corridor, where a young nun waited, her head bowed. "Sister," he said gently. "What's your name?" She looked up, and Gabriel's breath caught. Her eyes, green and haunted, held a storm of fear and defiance. "Mary Claire," she whispered, then glanced over her shoulder, as if expecting the walls to listen. Their gazes locked for a moment, a spark of something unspoken passing between them. Gabriel's hand twitched, as if to reach for her, but he stopped himself. "Focus," he thought. "You're here for answers, not distractions." Mary Claire hesitated, then spoke, her voice barely audible. "Be careful, Father. The convent, it watches." Before Gabriel could respond, she hurried away, her footsteps fading into the shadows. He stood alone, the weight of her words settling like a stone in his chest. The convent's silence was no longer empty, it was alive, and it was waiting. The convent's library was a maze of sagging shelves, its air thick with the musty scent of ancient parchment. Father Gabriel moved through the narrow aisles, his lantern casting long shadows that seemed to writhe on the walls. Mother Agnes had granted him access, but her eyes had followed him like a hawk, and he knew his time here was limited. He needed answers, something to explain the Vatican's cryptic reports of unnatural occurrences at St. Agatha's. He scanned the spines of leather-bound tomes, their titles faded into illegibility. Most were prayer books or hagiographies, but one shelf, tucked in a corner, was different. The books here were older, their covers cracked and stained, as if untouched for decades. Gabriel's fingers brushed one, and a jolt ran through him, like static. He pulled it free, a journal, its pages brittle, written in a trembling hand. The first entry was dated 1850. "The well speaks," it read. "It hungers. They sealed it, but she will never rest." The word sent a chill down Gabriel's spine. The journal belonged to a Sister Isabel, a nun who claimed the convent was built on a cursed well, a pagan site that predated the church. Her entries grew frantic, describing visions of a woman with burning eyes, whispers that drove her to madness. The final page was a single line: "They will bury me to silence her." Gabriel's pulse quickened. He slipped the journal into his satchel, but as he turned, a book fell from the shelf, landing open at his feet. Its pages were blank, except for a single drawing, a well, identical to the one in Agnes's tapestry, surrounded by symbols that made his skin crawl. The lantern flickered, and a low hum filled the room, like a distant chant. Gabriel spun, searching for the source, but the library was empty. Or was it? A shadow moved at the edge of his vision, fleeting but unmistakable. He drew the silver cross from his satchel, holding it aloft. "Show yourself," he said, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. The hum stopped, replaced by a woman's laughter, soft and venomous, echoing from nowhere and everywhere. The lantern went out, and Gabriel stood in darkness, the cross cold in his hand. When the light returned, the fallen book was closed, its cover unblemished. Gabriel exhaled, his breath visible in the suddenly frigid air. He knew now, whatever haunted St. Agatha's was no mere ghost. It was older, hungrier, and it knew he was here. Mary Clare's cell was a prison of stone and shadow, its single window barred against the night. She sat on her cot, her wrists still aching from the bruises she couldn't explain. Sleep was impossible, the whispers had followed her from the crypt, now a constant murmur in her mind. "Free me," they urged, and with them came flashes of the woman's face, half-rotted, her eyes like twin flames. Mary Clare clutched her rosary, but the beads felt lifeless, as if God had turned away. A creak broke her thoughts. The cell door, always locked, stood ajar. She rose, her heart hammering. The corridor beyond was dark, but a faint red smear glistened on the floor, blood, fresh and wet, leading toward the chapel. Mary Clare's instinct screamed to stay, but the whispers grew louder, pulling her forward. She stepped into the hall, her bare feet cold against the stone, and followed the trail. The chapel was a cavern of flickering candlelight, its air heavy with incense and dread. The blood trail ended at the altar, where the massive crucifix hung, its Christ figure staring down with hollow eyes. But something was wrong, horribly wrong. The crucifix was upside down, and blood dripped from its carved wounds, pooling on the altar below. Mary Clare's knees buckled, her rosary slipping to the floor. A rustle came from behind the altar. She turned, and there she was, the woman from the crypt, her tattered veil trailing like smoke. Her face was clearer now, one side decayed, the other eerily beautiful, her lips curled in a mocking smile. "They lied to you, child," she said, her voice a blade. "The convent is hers." Mary Clare stumbled back, a scream caught in her throat. The woman glided closer, her hand reaching out, and the candles flared, their flames turning black. The chapel door slammed shut, the sound like a gunshot. Mary Clare ran, pounding on the wood, but it wouldn't budge. The woman's laughter filled the air, and the blood on the altar began to move, forming words, libera me. Mary Claire fell to her knees, sobbing, her faith crumbling. The whispers surged, a tidal wave in her mind, and she felt the woman's cold fingers brush her cheek. Then, silence. The doors creaked open, and the woman was gone. Mary Claire staggered out, the blood words burned into her memory. She knew now, the convent was no sanctuary. It was a cage, and something ancient was clawing its way free. The convent's bell tolled midnight, its mournful clang echoing through the stone corridors like a death knell. Sister Ruth crept through the shadows of the dormitory, her heart pounding so loudly she feared it would betray her. The crust of bread she'd hidden in her sleeve was gone, eaten to steady her nerves, but it did little to quell the dread gnawing at her. Mary Claire's absence haunted her, and the memory of her friend's lantern-lit figure disappearing into the crypt replayed in her mind like a fever dream. Ruth's destination was the novices' wing, where Sister Lucia kept a hidden stash of keys to places Mother Agnes had declared forbidden. Ruth had seen Lucia use one once, slipping into a locked storeroom after dark. If Mary Claire was in trouble, those keys might lead to answers. The corridor was a gauntlet of creaking floorboards and flickering sconces, each shadow a potential watcher. Ruth's breath hitched as she passed a cracked mirror, her reflection distorted, her eyes too wide, too wild. The novices' wing was silent, the air heavy with the scent of wax and old wood. Ruth knelt by Lucia's cot, her fingers fumbling beneath the mattress. Her hand brushed cold metal, a ring of keys, their teeth jagged and ancient. As she pulled them free, a floorboard groaned behind her. Ruth froze, clutching the keys to her chest. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice trembling. No answer came, but the air grew colder, and a faint hum vibrated through the floor, like a heartbeat. Ruth's eyes darted to the window, where the fog pressed against the glass, forming shapes that seemed to writhe. She stood, backing away, when a hand clamped over her mouth. She thrashed, but the grip was iron. "Quiet," hissed Lucia, her face half-lit by moonlight. "You'll wake the whole convent." Ruth sagged with relief, but Lucia's eyes were hard. "What are you doing with those?" she demanded, nodding at the keys. Ruth hesitated, then spilled her fears, Mary Claire's disappearance, the crypt, the whispers she'd heard herself. Lucia's expression softened, but only slightly. "You're a fool," she said. "But you're not wrong. Something's rotten here. I've seen Agnes in the East Wing, chanting at night. Not prayers, something else." Lucia's words sent a chill through Ruth. She'd always trusted Agnes, feared her even, but this was different. "Help me find Mary Claire," Ruth pleaded. Lucia sighed, then nodded. "One condition, we do this my way. No heroics." They shook hands, a pact sealed in the dark, but as they turned to leave, the hum returned, louder, and the keys in Ruth's hand grew hot, burning her skin. She dropped them, gasping, and saw a faint glow pulse from the metal before fading. The convent wasn't just watching, it was alive. Father Gabriel couldn't sleep. The journal he'd found in the library burned in his mind, its pages a map to a truth he wasn't sure he wanted to uncover. Sister Isabel's words, "The well hungers," looped endlessly, mingling with the laughter he'd heard in the dark. He sat in his guest cell, a cramped room with a single candle, poring over the journal again. A new detail caught his eye, a sketch of a door, its frame carved with crosses and thorns, hidden in the East Wing. Isabel had written, "It leads to her." They guard it still. Gabriel dressed quickly, tucking the journal and his silver cross into his satchel. The convent was a maze, but he'd memorized its layout from Vatican maps. The east wing was off-limits, used only for storage, or so Agnes claimed. He slipped into the corridor, his boots silent on the stone. The air was thick, oppressive, as if the walls themselves resented his presence. The east wing was a forgotten place, its halls choked with cobwebs and a stench of mildew. Gabriel's lantern cast jagged shadows, and he moved cautiously, alert for any sound. He found the door from Isabel's sketch, half hidden behind a rotting tapestry. Its carvings were exactly as described, crosses entwined with thorns, their points sharp enough to draw blood. He touched one, and a drop of red welled on his finger, the pain startlingly sharp. The door was locked, its keyhole rusted but intact. Gabriel knelt, pulling a small lockpick from his satchel, a relic from a past life he buried when he took his vows. The lock resisted, grinding as if fighting back. A low moan echoed from beyond the door, like wind trapped in a cave. Gabriel's hand stilled, his pulse racing. He whispered a prayer, then tried again. The lock clicked, and the door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. He stepped forward, but a hand grabbed his arm. He spun, cross raised, and found Mary Claire, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. "You can't go down there," she whispered, her voice raw. "It's where she waits." Gabriel's heart skipped. Her presence, so close, stirred something he couldn't name. "Who?" he asked, lowering the cross. Mary Claire's gaze flickered to the staircase. "The woman from the chapel. She marked me." She pulled back her sleeve, revealing a fresh bruise on her wrist, shaped like a thorn. Gabriel's breath caught. It matched the carvings on the door. Before he could speak, the moan returned, louder, and the door slammed shut, the force knocking them back. The lantern shattered, and in the darkness, a voice whispered, "You're mine." Gabriel grabbed Mary Claire's hand, pulling her away as the walls seemed to close in. Mary Claire's hand trembled in Gabriel's as they stumbled through the east wing, the darkness behind them alive with whispers. They reached the main corridor, where a single sconce flickered, casting their shadows like ghosts. Gabriel released her, his fingers lingering a moment too long. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice soft but urgent. She shook her head, but her eyes told a different story. The bruise on her wrist burned, a reminder of the chapel, the blood, the woman who wasn't human. "I saw her," Mary Claire said, her voice breaking. "In the chapel. She said the convent belongs to her. And now I feel her inside me." Gabriel's jaw tightened. He'd faced demons before, metaphorically, in the sins of men, but this was different. The journal, the door, Mary Claire's mark, they pointed to something ancient, something the Vatican had sent him to confront. "Tell me everything," he said, guiding her to a stone bench. Mary Claire recounted the blood trail, the inverted crucifix, the words that formed on the altar. Her voice shook, but she held his gaze, finding strength in his steady presence. "I've heard her for weeks," she admitted. "Whispers, calling my name. I thought I was losing my mind. But after tonight, I know she's real." Gabriel listened, his mind racing. The Vatican's reports had mentioned a nun's visions, dismissed as hysteria, but Mary Claire was no hysteric. Her fear was raw, but so was her resolve. He wanted to protect her, to promise safety, but the cross in his satchel felt heavier now, a reminder of his duty. "You're not alone," he said, his voice low. "I've seen things too. The journal mentions a well, a curse. We'll find the truth." Mary Claire's eyes softened, a flicker of hope breaking through her fear. Their hands brushed, and for a moment, the convent's chill faded, replaced by a warmth neither could acknowledge. But the moment shattered as footsteps echoed, sharp, deliberate. Mother Agnes appeared, her face a mask of fury. "What are you doing out of your cell, sister?" she demanded, her eyes flicking to Gabriel. "And you, father, wandering where you don't belong." Gabriel stood, shielding Mary Claire. "I go where the church sends me," he said, his tone defiant. Agnes's smile was cold, predatory. "Then pray you find only what God intends." She turned and vanished into the shadows, but her presence lingered, a threat unspoken. Mary Claire clutched Gabriel's arm. "She knows," she whispered. "She's part of it." Gabriel nodded, his resolve hardening. The convent was a battlefield, and they were already in its crosshairs. The wind howled outside St. Agatha's, rattling the convent's ancient windows as if desperate to get in. Sister Ruth and Sister Lucia moved through the upper corridors, the stolen keys jangling softly in Ruth's trembling hand. Their pact to find Mary Claire had led them here, to the tower, a place whispered about in hushed tones, forbidden to all but Mother Agnes. The tower's door, heavy oak banded with iron, loomed at the end of a narrow hall, its surface scarred with scratches that looked too deliberate to be accidental. Ruth's breath came in shallow gasps. "This is where she goes," she whispered, her eyes darting to Lucia. "Agnes. I saw her climb the stairs last month, carrying a candle. She didn't come down till dawn." Lucia's face was grim, her pragmatism warring with fear. "If Mary Claire's up there, we get her and leave. No poking around." She took the keys, testing them one by one. The lock was stubborn, each key grinding uselessly until the last, a blackened, thorn-shaped key, clicked. The door groaned open, releasing a gust of air that smelled of wax and something sour, like spoiled wine. The staircase spiraled upward, its steps worn smooth by unseen feet. Lucia led, holding a stolen candle, its flame flickering wildly. The walls were etched with faint symbols, crosses, but twisted, their arms bent unnaturally. Ruth's skin prickled, the symbols seemed to pulse in the candlelight, as if alive. Halfway up, a low chant drifted down, not Latin but something older, guttural. Lucia froze, her hand gripping Ruth's arm. "That's not Agnes," she hissed. They pressed on, the chant growing louder, a single voice weaving a melody that was both beautiful and wrong. At the top, a circular chamber opened, its walls draped in faded tapestries depicting veiled women kneeling before a well. In the center stood a wooden altar, smaller than the chapels but no less imposing, adorned with candles that burned with a sickly green flame. A book lay open on the altar, its pages crawling with script Ruth couldn't read. The chant stopped abruptly, and the air grew heavy, pressing against their chests. Ruth stepped forward, drawn to the book, but Lucia yanked her back. "Don't touch it," she snapped. A creak came from behind a tapestry, and Ruth's heart leapt. "Mary Claire," she called, her voice trembling. The tapestry parted, revealing not Mary Claire but a shadow, a formless mass that pulsed like liquid night. It surged toward them, and Lucia screamed, shoving Ruth toward the stairs. The candles flared, their green flames licking the air, and the shadow hissed, a sound like burning flesh. They ran, the key slipping from Lucia's hand as they stumbled down the stairs. The door slammed shut behind them, locking with a finality that echoed like a gunshot. Ruth collapsed, sobbing, as Lucia pounded on the wood. "We're trapped," Ruth whispered, but Lucia's eyes were fixed on the floor, where the thorn-shaped key lay, its surface now etched with a single word, sanguis. Blood. Father Gabriel paced the guest cell, the journal's weight a constant reminder of the danger closing in. Mary Claire's confession had shaken him, not just her words, but the way her hand had felt in his, fragile yet fierce. He pushed the thought aside, focusing on the journal. Sister Isabel's final entry mentioned a relic, a shard of bone hidden in the convent, said to hold power over the hunger in the well. Gabriel needed to find it before Agnes, or whatever she served, did. He slipped into the chapel, its silence deeper now, as if the walls held their breath. The crucifix was upright again, the bloodstains gone, but the air felt wrong, like a storm about to break. Gabriel moved to the sacristy, a small room behind the altar where sacred objects were stored. The door was unlocked, a rare oversight in Agnes's iron grip. Inside, shelves held chalices, vestments, and a locked wooden box, its surface carved with thorns like those on the east wing door. Gabriel's lockpick made quick work of the box. Inside lay a velvet pouch, heavy with something solid. He untied it, revealing a shard of bone, no longer than his thumb, wrapped in a scrap of cloth stained with dark spots. The bone hummed faintly, warm to the touch, and Gabriel's vision blurred for a moment, images flashing through his mind, a woman's scream, blood pooling on stone. He staggered, clutching the box for support, and the bone pulsed, as if alive. A noise broke his trance, footsteps, soft but deliberate. Gabriel pocketed the relic and doused his lantern, pressing himself against the wall. The sacristy door creaked open, and Sister Mary Claire slipped inside, her face pale, her habit torn at the sleeve. "Father," she whispered, her voice urgent. "I heard you. I had to come." Gabriel stepped into the dim light, relief warring with caution. "You shouldn't be here," he said, but his tone softened as he saw the fear in her eyes. "What happened?" She showed him her wrist, the thorn-shaped bruise now deeper, almost black. "It's spreading," she said, her voice breaking. "She's in my dreams, telling me to open the well. I don't know how much longer I can fight her." Gabriel's hand moved instinctively, resting on her shoulder. "You're stronger than she is," he said, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the chapel faded, leaving only the two of them, bound by a shared defiance. But the moment shattered as a shadow passed over the sacristy window, and a low laugh echoed, the same venomous sound from the library. Gabriel pulled Mary Claire behind him, drawing the relic. The shadow vanished, but the laugh lingered, burrowing into their minds. "We need to move," Gabriel said, his grip tightening on the bone. "This is our only weapon." The convent's main hall was a cavern of stone and shadow, its high windows rattling as the storm outside grew fiercer. Gabriel and Mary Claire hurried through, the relic hidden in Gabriel's satchel, its warmth a faint pulse against his side. They needed to find Ruth and Lucia, to warn them about the tower and the shadow, but the convent felt alive now, its corridors shifting, its air thick with menace. They reached the refectory, where the nuns should have been gathered for evening prayers, but it was empty, the long tables abandoned. A single candle burned at the far end, its flame unnaturally still. Mary Claire's hand brushed Gabriel's, a silent anchor in the growing dread. "Something's wrong," she whispered, her eyes scanning the room. The doors slammed shut, the sound reverberating like thunder. Mother Agnes stepped from the shadows, her black habit blending with the darkness, her eyes glinting with a cold, unnatural light. "You've been busy, Father," she said, her voice smooth but laced with venom. "And you, Sister, disobeying yet again." Gabriel stepped forward, shielding Mary Claire. "What are you hiding, Agnes?" he demanded. The relic, Sister Isabel, what have you done?" Agnes laughed, a sound that chilled the blood. "Done? I've protected this convent for decades, kept her at bay. But you," she pointed at Mary Claire. "You've woken her with your meddling. The well calls, and it will have its due." Mary Claire's bruise throbbed, and she clutched her wrist, fighting the whispers surging in her mind. "You're serving her," she said, her voice trembling but defiant. "The woman in the veil. You've betrayed us all." Agnes's smile widened, predatory. "Betrayal? No, child. Sacrifice. The convent stands because of what I've given." She raised a hand, and the candle flared, its light revealing symbols etched into the refectory walls, thorns, crosses, wells. The air hummed, and Gabriel felt the relic pulse in response, its warmth turning to heat. He drew it, holding it aloft. "Enough," he said, his voice a command. "Whatever you've unleashed, will stop it." Agnes's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, her face seemed to flicker, as if something else looked through her. She lunged, faster than humanly possible, her hand closing around Mary Claire's throat. Gabriel tackled her, the relic falling to the floor. Agnes hissed, her strength unnatural, and threw him against the wall. Mary Claire screamed, grabbing the relic and pressing it to Agnes's chest. The older woman shrieked, recoiling, her skin blistering where the bone touched. She staggered back, the symbols on the walls fading, and fled into the shadows, her laughter echoing. Gabriel pulled Mary Claire to her feet, their breaths ragged. The relic lay between them, its glow fading but its power undeniable. "We're running out of time," Gabriel said, his eyes locked on hers. "We end this together." Mary Claire nodded, her fear tempered by resolve. The convent was no longer a sanctuary, it was a battlefield, and Act 1 closed with them standing on its edge, ready to face the darkness within. The storm outside St. Agatha's convent raged on, its fury shaking the ancient stones as if the sea itself sought to tear the place apart. Inside, the air was thick with the aftermath of confrontation. Father Gabriel and Sister Mary Claire stood in the refectory, the relic, a shard of bone pulsing faintly in Gabriel's hand, casting a dim glow that did little to dispel the darkness. Mother Agnes's retreat had left them shaken, her parting laughter a promise of worse to come. The symbols on the walls, now faded, seemed to linger in the air, a silent warning. Mary Claire's wrist throbbed, the thorn-shaped bruise spreading like ink beneath her skin. She clutched her rosary, but its beads offered no comfort. "She's not human anymore," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. "Agnes, she's part of it, isn't she?" Gabriel's jaw tightened, his eyes scanning the empty refectory. "If she's serving the thing in the well, we're not just fighting her. "We're fighting something older." He slipped the relic into his satchel, its warmth a reminder of the power they barely understood. "We need to find Ruth and Lucia. They're in danger." They moved toward the dormitory, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous halls. The convent felt different now, its silence predatory, as if it were waiting to strike. Mary Claire stayed close to Gabriel, her fear tempered by the strength she drew from his presence. Their hands brushed, a fleeting touch that sent a spark through her, forbidden but undeniable. She pushed it down, focusing on the task ahead, but the whispers in her mind grew louder, a woman's voice, "Open me, child. Free me." The dormitory was a maze of narrow corridors, its doors locked tight. Gabriel tried each one, his lockpick useless against the ancient bolts. A faint cry came from the far end, muffled but urgent. "Ruth!" Mary Claire called, her voice trembling. The cry came again, and they ran, reaching a door that hung ajar, its frame splintered as if forced open. Inside, the room was a wreck, cots overturned, prayer books scattered like fallen leaves. Ruth sat huddled in a corner, her face streaked with tears, her habit torn. Lucia stood over her, a knife in hand, her eyes wild. "Stay back!" Lucia shouted, brandishing the blade. "It's not safe." Gabriel raised his hands, his voice calm but firm. "Lucia, it's us." "What happened?" Lucia's gaze darted to the shadows, as if expecting something to lunge. "The tower," she said, her voice breaking. "We saw it, a shadow, alive, moving. It chased us." Ruth touched the book, and now, she pointed to Ruth's hand, where a burn mark pulsed, shaped like a thorn, identical to Mary Claire's bruise. Ruth sobbed, her words tumbling out. "It spoke to me. Said I belong to her now." The air grew colder, and the candle in the room flickered, its flame bending toward the door. A shadow slithered across the wall, formless yet deliberate, and a whisper returned, louder, directed at Mary Claire, "You cannot hide." Gabriel drew the relic, its glow flaring. The shadow recoiled, hissing, and vanished, but the whisper lingered, burrowing into their minds. Mary Claire clutched Gabriel's arm, her fear mirrored in his eyes. They were no longer hunters, they were prey. The convent's library was a tomb of forgotten knowledge, its shelves sagging under the weight of centuries. Gabriel led the group, Mary Claire, Ruth, and Lucia, here, seeking answers in the journal he'd found. The relic's glow had faded, but its presence was a constant hum, a reminder of the power they wielded and the danger they faced. The storm outside battered the windows, their glass rattling as if desperate to break. Gabriel spread the journal on a table, its pages brittle under the lantern's light. Sister Isabel's words were a lifeline, her warnings a map through the convent's darkness. She wrote about the well, Gabriel said, his finger tracing a passage. It's not just a place, it's a portal, sealed by blood. Isabel was sacrificed to keep it closed, but she's still here, bound to it. Mary Claire's bruise ached, a pulse in time with her heartbeat. The woman in the chapel, she said, her voice low. She's Isabel, isn't she? She wants the well opened. Lucia, still clutching her knife, shook her head. Why us? Why now? Her pragmatism was cracking, her fear roll. Ruth, silent since the tower, stared at her burn mark, her eyes distant, as if listening to something no one else could hear. Gabriel turned a page, revealing a sketch, a well surrounded by thorns, its depths inked black. Below it, Isabel had written, "The relic holds the key, but blood will break the seal. Beware the guardian, she wears a holy face." Gabriel's eyes met Mary Claire's, the word guardian hanging between them. "Agnes," he said. "She's been protecting the well, or serving it." A creak came from the shelves, and a lantern flickered. Ruth gasped, pointing to a book that had fallen, its pages open to a blank sheet. As they watched, words appeared, scrawled in red, sanguis vivit. "Blood lives." The air grew heavy, and the shelves groaned, books sliding to the floor as if pushed by unseen hands. Mary Claire's bruise burned, and she stumbled, a vision flashing through her mind, a well, its waters churning with faces, all screaming. Gabriel grabbed her, steadying her. "Stay with me," he said, his voice an anchor. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the library faded, leaving only the two of them, their shared resolve a shield against the darkness. But the moment broke as Lucia shouted, pointing to the ceiling. Shadows gathered there, swirling like smoke, forming a face, Isabel's, her eyes hollow, her mouth open in a silent scream. The relic flared, its light cutting through the shadows. The face dissolved, but the books continued to fall, their pages fluttering like wings. Gabriel pulled the group toward the door, the journal clutched to his chest. "We're not safe here," he said. "We need to find a well before Agnes does." As they fled, Mary Claire glanced back, and for a fleeting moment, she saw Isabel standing among the shelves, her veil dripping blood, her eyes fixed on her. The message was clear, time was running out. The east wing of St. Agatha's was a graveyard of forgotten rooms, its corridors choked with dust and despair. Gabriel led the group through its labyrinth, the journal's sketch of the thorn-carved door their guide. The relic's warmth pulsed in his satchel, a faint heartbeat against the convent's oppressive silence. Mary Claire stayed close, her bruise a constant ache, her mind torn between fear and a growing pull of Gabriel's presence. Ruth trailed behind, her burn mark hidden but her eyes glassy, as if something else looked through them. Lucia gripped her knife, her skepticism eroded by the library's horrors. The door from Isabel's sketch loomed ahead, its carvings sharper in the lantern's light, the thorns almost alive. Gabriel touched the lock, expecting resistance, but it clicked open, as if inviting them in. "Stay sharp," he said, his voice low. The staircase beyond descended into darkness, its air thick with the scent of damp stone and something sweeter, like rotting fruit. They moved single file, the steps slick underfoot. The walls were carved with symbols, thorns, wells, eyes, that seemed to shift in the flickering light. Mary Claire's bruise pulsed, and the whispers returned, a chorus now, chanting her name. She gripped Gabriel's arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. "She's here," she whispered, her voice trembling. Gabriel's hand covered hers, a silent promise, but his eyes stayed on the shadows below. The staircase ended in a circular chamber, its walls slick with moss, its center dominated by a stone platform. Above it hung a chandelier of bones, their surfaces etched with the same symbols as the walls. The platform was empty, but the air hummed, a low vibration that set their teeth on edge. Gabriel approached, the journal open in his hand. "This is it," he said. "The well's entrance. Isabel wrote it was sealed here." Lucia's knife glinted as she scanned the room. "Sealed how?" she asked, her voice sharp. Ruth, silent, stepped toward the platform, her movements jerky, as if pulled by invisible strings. "Ruth, no." Mary Claire called, but Ruth's hand touched the stone, and the chamber shook, dust raining from the ceiling. A crack split the platform, revealing a glimpse of black water below, its surface rippling with unnatural light. The whispers surged, a deafening roar, and Ruth screamed, her burn mark glowing red. Shadows poured from the crack, coalescing into Isabel's form, her veil trailing like smoke, her eyes burning. "You've come," she said, her voice a blade. "Now bleed." Gabriel thrust the relic forward, its light flaring. Isabel hissed, retreating, but the crack widened, and the water began to rise, its surface alive with hands reaching out. Mary Claire pulled Ruth back, her heart pounding as Gabriel shouted, "Run!" They fled up the stairs, the chamber collapsing behind them, the wells hunger a living thing at their heels. The east wing's collapse sent tremors through St. Agatha's, the convent groaning like a wounded beast. Father Gabriel, Sister Mary Claire, Sister Ruth, and Sister Lucia stumbled into a side corridor, dust choking the air as the staircase behind them crumbled. The relic in Gabriel's satchel pulsed erratically, its warmth now a scalding heat, as if protesting the well's awakening. Mary Claire's bruise burned, a mirror to Ruth's glowing mark, both throbbing in sync with the distant hum emanating from the sealed chamber below. Ruth collapsed against a wall, her breath ragged, her eyes unfocused. "She's inside me," she whispered, clawing at her burned hand. "I can feel her pulling." Lucia, her knife still drawn, grabbed Ruth's wrist, forcing her to meet her gaze. "Fight it, Ruth. You're stronger than this." But her voice wavered, betraying her fear. The shadow in the tower, the hands in the well, Lucia's pragmatism was unraveling, her grip on reality slipping. Gabriel knelt beside Ruth, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Tell us what you saw in the tower." "The book, what was it?" Ruth's eyes darted, as if afraid the walls would hear. "It wasn't a book," she said, her voice barely audible. "It was alive. Pages of skin, words that moved. It said the well needs a vessel. A traitor to open it." Mary Claire's blood ran cold. "A traitor?" she asked, her mind flashing to Agnes's cold smile, her unnatural strength. But Ruth's gaze fixed on her, and for a moment, her eyes weren't her own, black, bottomless, like the well itself. "You," Ruth hissed, then blinked, her face crumpling. "No, I didn't mean, it's her, making me say it." Gabriel pulled Mary Claire back, his hand lingering protectively on her arm. "It's not you," he said, his eyes locking with hers, a silent vow. But the doubt lingered, a poison seeping into her thoughts. Her bruise, Ruth's mark, the whispers, they all pointed to her, as if the well had chosen her from the start. The air grew heavier, and a faint scratching sounded from the walls, rhythmic, deliberate, like nails on stone. Lucia spun, her knife raised. "We're not alone," she said, her voice sharp. The scratching stopped, replaced by a low laugh, Isabel's, unmistakable, slithering from the shadows. The corridor darkened, the sconces flickering out one by one. Gabriel drew the relic, its light weak but defiant, and the laugh faded, but not before a single word echoed, "Traitor." They moved quickly, retreating to the main hall, but Ruth lagged, her steps unsteady. As they reached the doorway, she stopped, her hand brushing the wall. A symbol appeared beneath her touch, a thorn, glowing red, identical to her burn. The wall cracked, and a black mist seeped out, curling toward her. Mary Claire lunged, pulling Ruth away, but the mist grazed her, and her bruise flared, a searing pain that dropped her to her knees. Gabriel caught her, his arms steady, his voice a lifeline. "Stay with me, Mary Claire." The mist retreated, but the symbol remained, a brand on the convent's skin. Ruth sobbed, her words a plea. "It's me. I'm the traitor." But Mary Claire's heart screamed otherwise. The well was playing them, turning them against each other, and Agnes was its puppet master. The main hall was a sanctuary of sorts, its high ceiling lost in shadows, its windows rattling under the storm's assault. Gabriel gathered the group near a cracked statue of Saint Agatha, its stone eyes seeming to watch their every move. The relic lay on the floor between them, its glow dim, as if drained by the well's awakening. Mary Claire's bruise pulsed, a constant reminder of the darkness clawing at her soul. Ruth sat apart, her burn hand hidden, her silence a wall no one could breach. Gabriel opened Isabel's journal, its pages now brittle, as if decaying with the convent. "We need to understand the well," he said, his voice low but urgent. Isabel wrote about a ritual, a blood pact to seal the well. But it required a guardian, someone to maintain the seal. He turned a page, revealing a list of names, each crossed out, ending with Agnes, 1975. "She's been here 50 years, Gabriel said. "Longer than any nun should live." Lucia's knife glinted as she leaned forward. "You're saying Agnes is, what? Immortal?" Her tone was skeptical, but her eyes betrayed her fear. Mary Claire's mind raced, piecing together Agnes's cryptic words, her unnatural strength. "Not immortal," she said, her voice steady despite her pain. "Bound. The well gives her power, but it owns her." Ruth's head snapped up, her voice a whisper. "The book in the tower, it showed me. Agnes bleeds for the well, every year, to keep it quiet. But it's waking now because," she hesitated, her eyes flicking to Mary Claire. "Because you're here." Mary Claire's heart sank, the whispers surging in her mind. "You're mine," they chanted, Isabel's voice unmistakable. She clutched her rosary, but it burned her fingers, and she dropped it, the beads scattering across the floor. Gabriel's hand found hers, his touch grounding her. "It's lying," he said, his voice fierce. "You're not its vessel. We'll prove it." He turned back to the journal, finding a passage about the relic. "The bone of the martyr holds the light, but only faith can wield it." Gabriel's eyes met Mary Claire's, a spark of hope passing between them. "Faith," he said. "Not blood. That's why Agnes fears it." A sudden crash broke their focus. The statue of Saint Agatha toppled, its head rolling to a stop at Ruth's feet. The air grew frigid, and the shadows thickened, forming a figure, Isabel, her veil dripping blood, her eyes fixed on Mary Claire. "Faith fails," she hissed, her voice a chorus of screams. "Blood endures." Gabriel thrust the relic forward, its light flaring. Isabel shrieked, her form dissolving, but the statue's eyes glowed red, and the floor trembled, as if the well itself stirred. Lucia grabbed Ruth, pulling her away, while Gabriel shielded Mary Claire, their bodies closed, their breaths mingling. The hall stilled, but the truth was clear, the well was awake, and it wanted Mary Claire. The convent's bell tolled 3 in the morning, its sound a mournful cry swallowed by the storm. Gabriel led the group to the sacristy, a cramped room behind the chapel, seeking a moment's safety to regroup. The relic's glow was nearly gone, its power fading, and Mary Claire's bruise now covered her forearm, its thorns creeping like veins. Ruth's burn mark glowed faintly, her silence a growing chasm between her and the others. Lucia's knife never left her hand, her eyes scanning every shadow. Gabriel barred the door, his face etched with determination. "We can't stay here," he said, spreading the journal on a table. "The well's in the east wing, sealed but not for long. We need to destroy it before Agnes opens it." He looked at Mary Claire, his gaze softening. "And we need to keep you safe." Mary Claire's heart ached, torn between fear and the warmth of his words. "I'm not safe," she said, her voice breaking. "She's in me, Gabriel. Every time I close my eyes, I see the well, feel it calling." His hand brushed her cheek, a gesture so gentle it nearly undid her. "Then we'll fight her together," he said, his voice a vow. Lucia snorted, her knife tapping the table. "Romantic, but useless. We need a plan, not promises." She pointed to the journal. Isabel mentioned a chant, something to bind the well. "Can we use it?" Gabriel nodded, finding the passage. "The martyr's chant, spoken in faith, seals the hunger." But before he could read further, Ruth stood, her movements jerky, her eyes black as pitch. "No chance," she said, her voice not her own. "Only blood." She lunged, grabbing the relic and hurling it against the wall. The bone cracked, its light extinguishing, and the room plunged into darkness. Lucia tackled Ruth, pinning her to the floor, but Ruth's strength was unnatural, her nails clawing at Lucia's face. Gabriel pulled them apart, his arms straining, while Mary Claire scrambled for the relic, its pieces cold in her hands. The door rattled, and Agnes's voice came through, smooth and venomous. "You can't stop her, children. The well is open." The door burst open, and Agnes stood there, her habit soaked in blood, her eyes glowing red. She raised a dagger, its blade etched with thorns, and lunged at Mary Claire. Gabriel threw himself in front, the blade grazing his arm, blood welling. Mary Claire screamed, clutching the broken relic, and a pulse of light flared from it, weak but enough to drive Agnes back. They fled, dragging Ruth, who fought like a wild animal. The sacristy's walls cracked, and the well's hum filled the air, a siren call to chaos. Gabriel's wound bled freely, but he held Mary Claire's hand, their bond a flicker of hope in the darkness. Active stakes were clear, the well was winning, and betrayal was its weapon. The corridors of St. Agatha's convent twisted like a serpent's spine, their shadows alive with menace as Father Gabriel, Sister Mary Claire, Sister Ruth, and Sister Lucia fled the sacristy. The air pulsed with the well's hum, a low, guttural chant that seemed to rise from the earth itself. Gabriel's arm bled where Agnes's dagger had struck, the pain sharp but secondary to the broken relic in Mary Claire's hands. Its fragments, once glowing with holy power, now felt like dead stone, their light extinguished. Ruth, half dragged by Lucia, thrashed against her grip, her burn mark glowing red, her eyes flickering between terror and something darker. They burst into the chapel, its high-vaulted ceiling swallowing the storm's roar. The crucifix loomed above the altar, upright but wrong, its Christ figure's eyes seemed to follow them, glinting with the light that wasn't there. Gabriel barred the door, his breath ragged. "We need to regroup," he said, his voice strained. "The relic's gone, but we have the journal. There's still a way." Mary Claire clutched the relic's pieces, her bruise now a web of thorns creeping up her arm. The whispers in her mind were relentless, Isabel's voice weaving promises of freedom with threats of doom. "The well's awake," she said, her voice trembling. "I can feel it pulling me. If we don't stop it, it'll take us all." Lucia, her knife blooded from Ruth's struggle, snorted. "Stop it how? Agnes is out there, and Ruth's half possessed. We're out of miracles." But her eyes betrayed her fear, darting to the shadows as if expecting Isabel to materialize. Ruth whimpered, curling into a ball near the altar. "I didn't mean to," she sobbed. "The book, it made me. It wants her." Her finger pointed at Mary Claire, and the air grew colder, the candles on the altar flickering out. Gabriel stepped between them, his hand on Mary Claire's shoulder, his touch a steadying force. "No one's taking her," he said, his voice a low growl. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the chapel's dread faded, replaced by a warmth that defied their vows. The journal lay open on the altar, its pages fluttering without wind. Gabriel scanned it, finding a passage about the martyr's chant. "Speak it where the light was born, and the hunger will sleep." He looked up, his gaze settling on the crucifix. "Here," he said. "The chapel's the heart of the convent. If we can say the chant, we might bind the well." Mary Claire nodded, her resolve hardening. She began the chant, her voice soft but clear, Latin words she'd memorized as a novice. Gabriel joined her, their voices blending, a fragile shield against the darkness. Lucia watched, skeptical but silent, while Ruth's sobs quieted, her burn mark dimming. The air stilled, and for a moment, it seemed to work, until the crucifix shuddered, its wood cracking, and blood seeped from its wounds, dripping onto the altar. Isabel's laugh filled the chapel, sharp and cruel. "Faith is weak," her voice echoed, coming from everywhere. The candles relit, their flames black, and the shadows coalesced into her form, a tattered veil trailing like smoke. "Blood is power." She reached for Mary Claire, her fingers claw-like, but Gabriel thrust the journal forward, its pages glowing faintly. Isabel recoiled, shrieking, and the chapel shook, pews splintering as the well's hum surged. They ran, the chant unfinished, Isabel's laughter chasing them. The chapel doors slammed shut behind them, locking the horror inside, but the blood on the altar kept flowing, a promise of the well's growing strength. The group stumbled into the cloister, a courtyard open to the storm's wrath, its stone paths slick with rain. Lightning illuminated the convent spires, casting them as claws against the sky. Gabriel's wound throbbed, his sleeve soaked with blood, but he kept moving, the journal clutched to his chest. Mary Claire's bruise now reached her elbow, its thorns pulsing with each heartbeat, her face pale but defiant. Ruth leaned on Lucia, her burn mark dim but her eyes still distant, as if tethered to the well. Lucia's knife gleamed, her knuckles white around its hilt, her pragmatism shattered by the chapel's horrors. They took shelter under a crumbling arch, the rain a cold lash against their skin. "We can't keep running," Lucia said, her voice raw. "Agnes is hunting us, and that thing is everywhere." "What's the plan, priest?" Gabriel's eyes flicked to Mary Claire, her presence a beacon in the chaos. "The chant didn't work because we weren't ready," he said. "The journal says it needs faith, unwavering faith. We have to believe, all of us." He looked at Lucia, whose scoff was immediate. "Believe? In what?" "A God who lets this happen." Her words cut, but her voice cracked, revealing the doubt beneath her anger. Mary Claire stepped forward, her voice steady despite her pain. "I doubted too," she admitted, her eyes meeting Gabriel's, a confession shared between them. "But I've seen the relic's power, felt it. There's something greater than the well, and we have to trust it." Her words stirred something in Gabriel, a memory of his own faltering faith, tested by years of loss. He nodded, his hand brushing hers, a touch that spoke louder than words. Ruth's voice, small and broken, broke the silence. "I don't know if I can," she whispered. "She's in my head, showing me things, blood, fire, the well swallowing everything. What if I'm not strong enough?" Her burn mark flared, and she winced, pulling away from Lucia's grip. Lucia's face softened, a rare vulnerability surfacing. "None of us are strong enough alone," she said, her knife lowering. "But together, maybe." She looked at Gabriel, a grudging respect in her eyes. "What do we do next?" Gabriel opened a journal, rain smudging its ink. A new passage caught his eye, written in a different hand, fresher. "The guardian's blood feeds the well, but the martyr's blood can close it." His heart sank. "The relic was part of a martyr," he said. "But it's broken. We need something else, someone else's blood." His eyes flicked to Mary Claire, the implication chilling. A scream pierced the storm, not Isabel's but human, coming from the dormitory. Lucia's knife snapped up. "That's one of ours," she said, already moving. They followed, the journal's warning heavy in Gabriel's mind. The well demanded blood, and doubt was its ally, sowing discord among them. As they ran, Mary Claire's hand found his, a silent vow to face the darkness together, even as the storm seemed to scream their doom. The dormitory was a warren of narrow cells, their doors splintered, their silence shattered by the scream that still echoed in the group's ears. Gabriel led the way, his wound slowing him but not his resolve. Mary Claire stayed close, her bruise a burning map of thorns, the whispers in her mind now a cacophony, urging her to surrender. Ruth stumbled behind, her burn mark pulsing, her face a mask of fear and guilt. Lucia's knife was ready, her eyes scanning the shadows, her earlier doubt buried under the need to act. The scream had come from Sister Beatrice's cell, a timid novice who rarely spoke. They found her door ajar, blood seeping from beneath it, pooling on the stone floor. Gabriel pushed it open, revealing a scene of carnage. Beatrice lay sprawled on her cot, her throat slashed, her eyes wide with terror. Symbols, thorns, wells, eyes, were carved into her skin, still bleeding, as if the wounds refused to close. The air was thick with the stench of blood and something fouler, like sulfur. Mary Claire gagged, turning away, but the whispers surged, Isabel's voice clear, "See what I offer. Join me, or join her." She clutched Gabriel's arm, her nails digging in, and he steadied her, his own horror mirrored in her eyes. "This is Agnes's work," he said, his voice low. "She's feeding the well." Lucia knelt by Beatrice, her knife trembling. "She was just a girl," she whispered, her voice breaking. Ruth whimpered, backing away, her burn mark flaring. "It's my fault," she sobbed. "I touched the book. I let her in." Her words were cut off as the walls shook, the blood on the floor rippling, forming words, sanguis exigit. Blood demands. Gabriel pulled the journal, its pages now stained with his own blood from his wound. The martyr's blood, he said, his voice urgent. Beatrice wasn't enough. The well wants more. He looked at Mary Claire, the weight of the journal's warning crushing him. Her bruise, Ruth's mark, they were targets, chosen by the well's hunger. A shadow moved in the corridor, swift and silent. Lucia spun, her knife slashing air, but Agnes was faster, her blood-soaked habit a blur as she struck. Lucia fell, clutching her side, blood welling through her fingers. Gabriel tackled Agnes, his strength fading, but she slipped free, her dagger flashing. Mary Claire grabbed a candlestick, swinging it at Agnes's head, and the older woman staggered, her eyes glowing red. "The well will have her," Agnes hissed, pointing at Mary Claire, before vanishing into the shadows. Gabriel helped Lucia up, her wound deep but not fatal. Ruth stood frozen, her burn mark now a blazing thorn, her voice a stranger's, "It's too late." The dormitory shook, the well's hum a deafening roar, and the group realized the truth. The well wasn't just awake, it was hunting. The dormitory's blood-soaked floor seemed to pulse beneath their feet as Father Gabriel, Sister Mary Claire, Sister Ruth, and Sister Lucia staggered away from Sister Beatrice's mutilated body. The well's hum was a living thing now, vibrating through St. Agatha's convent, its walls groaning as if the stones themselves were in pain. Gabriel's arm throbbed where Agnes's dagger had cut him, his blood mixing with the dust, while Mary Claire's bruise spread like a plague, its thorn-like tendrils now curling toward her shoulder. Ruth's burn mark glowed faintly, her face a mask of guilt and fear, and Lucia clutched her side, blood seeping through her fingers from Agnes's attack. They retreated to the cloister, the storm outside a relentless assault, rain lashing the courtyard like divine wrath. Gabriel's satchel held the journal and the broken relic, its fragments useless but heavy with meaning. "We can't stay here," he said, his voice hoarse but resolute. "Agnes is feeding the well with blood. Beatrice was just the start." Mary Claire's eyes were haunted, the whispers in her mind a relentless tide. "Give yourself to me," Isabel's voice purred, promising peace in surrender. She shook her head, clinging to Gabriel's presence, his steady gaze a lifeline. "It wants me," she said, her voice trembling. "The well, it's choosing me." Lucia, pale from blood loss, leaned against a pillar, a knife trembling in her hand. "Then we keep you away from it," she said, her voice fierce despite her pain. "No one else dies tonight." But her eyes flicked to Ruth, whose silence was unnerving, her burn mark pulsing in time with the well's hum. Gabriel opened the journal, its pages now curling at the edges, as if scorched. A passage caught his eye, written in Isabel's frantic hand, "The well feeds on betrayal. The guardian offers blood, but the chosen breaks the seal." His heart sank. "The chosen," he said, his voice low. "It's not just Agnes. The well needs someone pure, someone marked." His gaze met Mary Claire's, the weight of the words crushing. Ruth's voice, small and broken, cut through the tension. "It's my fault," she whispered, her burn mark flaring. "I touched the book, let her in. I'm the betrayal." She lunged for the journal, her movements jerky, as if controlled. Gabriel caught her, pinning her arms, but her strength was unnatural, her eyes black as the well's depths. "Let me go," she screamed, her voice layered with Isabel's. "She'll take me instead." Mary Claire grabbed Ruth's face, her own bruise burning, and shouted, "Fight her, Ruth! You're not hers." Their eyes locked, and for a moment, Ruth's humanity flickered, her burn mark dimming. But the cloister shook, the ground cracking, and a black mist rose, curling toward Ruth. Gabriel pulled her back, the mist grazing his wounded arm, and a searing pain shot through him, visions of blood and fire flooding his mind. Lucia slashed at the mist with her knife, her wound slowing her but not her resolve. The mist retreated, but the cracks in the ground widened, revealing glimpses of black water below, its surface alive with whispers. Gabriel clutched Mary Claire's hand, their fingers intertwining, a silent vow to face the world together. The journal's warning was clear, the well's hunger was growing, and it would not stop until it claimed its chosen. The group fled the cloister, the storm's roar drowning out the well's hum but not its presence. They sought refuge in the library, its shelves a fragile barrier against the convent's wrath. Gabriel's wound bled freely now, staining the journal as he spread it open, its pages trembling in the draught. Mary Claire's bruise was a map of torment, its thorns now reaching her neck, each pulse a call to surrender. Ruth sat silently, her burn mark hidden but her eyes distant, while Lucia bound her wound with a torn strip of her habit, her face grim. "We need to understand Agnes," Gabriel said, his voice urgent. "She's the guardian, but she's not just serving the well, she's bound to it." He found a passage in the journal, written in a different hand, dated decades ago. "The guardian's blood renews the seal, but the well's price is eternal. She cannot die while it hungers." Gabriel's eyes widened. Agnes isn't human anymore. The well keeps her alive. Mary Claire's heart raced, the whispers in her mind shifting, Isabel's voice now joined by another, deeper, older, feminine. "Bleed for me," it purred, and her bruise burned, a vision flashing, Agnes kneeling before a well, her wrists slashed, blood pooling into black water. "She's performing a ritual," Mary Claire said, her voice shaking. "I saw it. She's in the east wing, feeding the well now." Lucia's knife glinted as she stood, her wound slowing her but not her fire. "Then we find her and stop her," she said. "No more running." Ruth's head snapped up, her voice a whisper. "You can't. She's too strong. The well protects her." Her burn mark flared, and she winced, curling into herself. Gabriel's hand found Mary Claire's, his touch a spark in the darkness. "We don't have a choice," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "If Agnes completes the ritual, the well opens fully. We lose everything." Their closeness was a forbidden comfort, their vows a fading echo against the well's pull. Mary Claire nodded, her resolve hardening, but the whispers grew louder, promising power if she gave in. They moved toward the east wing, the convent's corridors now warped, their walls bleeding water that smelled of decay. The hum was deafening, and the air grew thick, slowing their steps. As they neared the thorn-carved door, a chant echoed, not Latin but something primal, its rhythm matching the well's pulse. Gabriel pushed the door open, revealing a chamber lit by green-flamed candles, their light casting grotesque shadows. Agnes stood at the center, her habit soaked in blood, her dagger raised over a stone altar. Her eyes glowed red, her face a mask of ecstasy and pain. "You're too late," she sang, her voice layered with the wells. The altar cracked, and black water surged, hands reaching from its depths. Mary Claire's bruise flared, and she screamed, falling to her knees as Isabel's form appeared beside Agnes, her veil dripping blood, her eyes fixed on her prey. Gabriel lunged, but the water lashed out, knocking him back. Lucia threw her knife, but it sank into the water, useless. Ruth stood frozen, her burn mark blazing, and the well's hands reached for her, pulling her toward the altar. Mary Clare's scream echoed, a desperate plea, as the ritual's power threatened to consume them all. The east wing chamber was a maelstrom of chaos, the well's black water flooding the floor, its hands clawing at the air. Agnes's chant rose, a hymn to the abyss, her blood dripping onto the altar, feeding the well's hunger. Father Gabriel struggled to his feet, his wound afire in his arm, the journal slipping from his grasp. Sister Mary Clare's bruise was a torment, its thorns now circling her heart, the whispers, Isabel's and a deeper voice, urging her to join the well. Sister Ruth teetered on the altar's edge, her burn mark a beacon, the well's hands wrapped around her ankles. Sister Lucia, blooded but unbowed, fought to reach Ruth, her strength fading. Gabriel grabbed the journal, its pages now soaked, and shouted the chant. "We need the martyr's chant." He found the passage, his voice rising over the well's roar, Latin words of faith and sacrifice. Mary Clare joined him, her voice trembling but defiant, their harmony a fragile thread against the darkness. The well's hands recoiled, and Ruth's burn mark dimmed, her eyes clearing for a moment. Agnes laughed, her dagger flashing as she slashed her own arm, blood pouring into the water. "Faith is nothing," she screamed, her voice no longer human. "The well is eternal." Isabel's form solidified, her hands reaching for Mary Clare, her voice a siren's call. "Come to me, child. Be my vessel." Mary Clare's resolve wavered, the whispers overwhelming, but Gabriel's hand found hers, his touch a blaze of light in her darkness. "You are enough," he said, his eyes fierce with belief. Their voices grew stronger, the chant resonating, and the well's water began to still, its hands retreating. Lucia reached Ruth, pulling her from the altar, but Agnes lunged, her dagger aimed at Mary Clare's heart. Gabriel threw himself in front, the blade sinking into his shoulder. He grunted, falling to his knees, but his grip on Mary Clare's hand never faltered. "Keep chanting," he gasped, blood pooling beneath him. Mary Clare's voice broke, tears streaming, but she obeyed, the chant now a prayer for him as much as for the well. Lucia tackled Agnes, her wound slowing her, and the two women grappled, blood mixing with the water. The well's hum faltered, and Isabel shrieked, her form flickering. But Agnes broke free, her dagger raised, and Ruth, her burn mark blazing, stepped forward. "Take me," she whispered, her voice her own again. She grabbed Agnes's arm, pulling her toward the altar, and the well's hands surged, dragging them both into the water. Ruth's scream was cut off as the water swallowed her, Agnes's laughter fading with her. The chamber stilled, the water receding, but the cost was heavy. Gabriel collapsed, his blood staining Mary Clare's hands, and she cradled him, her chant now a sob. The well was quiet, but not sealed, and the price of their faith was clear. Ruth was gone, and the battle was far from over. The east wing chamber was a ruin, its stone floor slick with receding black water, the air heavy with the stench of blood and decay. Father Gabriel lay slumped against the cracked altar, his shoulder bleeding where Agnes's dagger had struck, his face pale but his eyes fierce with determination. Sister Mary Clare knelt beside him, her hands stained with his blood, her bruise now a network of thorns snaking across her chest, each pulse a scream from the well. Sister Lucia stood guard, her own wound seeping through her torn habit, her knife trembling as she scanned the shadows. Sister Ruth was gone, swallowed by the well in her desperate sacrifice to take Agnes with her, but the silence that followed was no victory, it was a predator waiting. Mary Clare's voice was raw from the martyr's chant, her tears mixing with the blood on her hands. "Stay with me, Gabriel," she whispered, her fingers pressing against his wound, trying to stem the flow. His hand covered hers, weak but warm, and their eyes met, a silent vow that transcended their vows to the church. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, his voice a gravelly promise, though his fading strength told a different story. Lucia's voice cut through, sharp and urgent. "We need to move. The well's quiet, but it's not sealed. Agnes might still be alive down there." She kicked at the altar, its surface scarred from the ritual, and a faint hum answered, a reminder that the well's hunger was only sated, not defeated. The journal lay nearby, its pages soaked but intact, and Gabriel reached for it, wincing as pain lanced through him. Mary Clare helped him, opening the journal to a passage marked with a thorn-shaped stain. "The well's seal requires blood and faith, but betrayal opens it anew. The chosen must resist, or all is lost." Her heart sank, the word, chosen, a blade in her chest. Her bruise, Ruth's mark, Beatrice's death, all pointed to her as the well's target. "It's me," she said, her voice breaking. "Ruth died to protect me, but it's not enough. It wants my blood." Gabriel's grip tightened, his eyes blazing despite his pain. "No," he said, his voice fierce. "You're not its vessel. We'll find another way." But his words were drowned by a sudden tremor, the chamber shaking as the well's hum returned, louder, angrier. The water surged again, its surface alive with hands, their fingers claw-like, reaching for Mary Clare. Lucia slashed at them, a knife useless against the liquid shadows, and Gabriel pulled Mary Clare back, his body a shield despite his wounds. A voice echoed, not Isabel's but deeper, feminine, ancient, Lilith, the well's true master. "You cannot deny me," it purred, its words a caress and a threat. "Your blood is mine, child." Mary Clare's bruise burned, and she screamed, collapsing as visions flooded her, a well of endless black faces trapped within, screaming for release. Gabriel held her, his voice a desperate chant, Latin prayers mixing with her name, pulling her back from the abyss. The water retreated, but the chamber was collapsing, stones falling from the ceiling. Lucia grabbed the journal, shoving it into Gabriel's satchel. "We're out of time," she shouted, helping Mary Clare to her feet. They fled, half carrying Gabriel, the well's laughter chasing them as the east wing crumbled, sealing the altar behind a wall of rubble. Actor's cost was clear, Ruth's life, Gabriel's strength, and Mary Clare's fading resistance, all sacrificed to a well that refused to sleep. The group staggered into the convent's main hall, its high windows shattered by the storm, rain pooling on the stone floor. Gabriel leaned heavily on Mary Clare, his wound a steady drip of blood, his face ashen but his resolve unbroken. Mary Clare's bruise was a torment, its thorns now circling her throat, a noose tightening with each breath. Lucia's wound had slowed her, but her eyes burned with defiance, her knife a constant companion. The journal, battered but whole, was their only guide, its pages a fragile hope against the well's relentless hunger. They collapsed near a toppled statue of the Virgin Mary, its serene face cracked, as if mourning their losses. Gabriel's breath was shallow, but he forced himself to speak. "The well's not sealed," he said, his voice weak. "Ruth's sacrifice bought us time, but Lilith, she's stronger than Isabel. She's the well's heart. Mary Clare's hands trembled, the whispers now a constant roar, Lilith's voice weaving promises of power with threats of oblivion. I can't fight her much longer, she admitted, her eyes meeting Gabriel's, raw with fear and something deeper, forbidden. She's in me, breaking me down. His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining, a touch that defied the convent's walls and their sacred vows. You're not alone, he said, his voice a lifeline. I'll fight with you, until the end. Lucia's scoff was bitter, her knife tapping the floor. Pretty words, priest, but we're out of miracles. Ruth's gone, you're bleeding out, and Mary Clare's half-possessed. What's left? Her words stung, but her eyes betrayed her grief, her pragmatism shattered by the loss of Ruth and Beatrice. She turned away, hiding the tears she refused to shed. Gabriel opened the journal, its ink smudged but legible. A new passage, written in Isabel's hand, stood out. The well's seal lies in the martyr's heart, not her blood. Faith must burn brighter than betrayal. He looked at Mary Clare, his voice steady despite his pain. Your faith, Mary Clare. It's what Lilith fears. That's why she targets you. Mary Clare's heart ached, torn between doubt and the warmth of Gabriel's belief in her. She wanted to believe, to hold on to the faith that had brought her to St. Agatha's, but the whispers were relentless, Lilith's voice a seductive poison. A sudden crash broke her thoughts, a window shattered, and a gust of wind carried a scream, human and desperate, from the dormitory. Lucia was on her feet, knife raised. Another sister, she said, her voice grim. We can't leave them to Agnes. Gabriel struggled to stand, but Mary Clare pressed him down, her touch gentle but firm. You're too weak, she said, her eyes pleading. Let me go with Lucia. Their gazes locked, a moment of unspoken love, and Gabriel nodded, his hand lingering on hers. As Mary Clare and Lucia ran toward the dormitory, the journal slipped from Gabriel's lap, its pages open to a final warning, the heart breaks before the well. The storm roared, and the convent seemed to tighten around them, a trap closing on their fractured bond. The dormitory was a slaughterhouse, its corridors stained with blood, its silence broken by the faint sobs of surviving nuns. Sister Mary Clare and Sister Lucia moved through the shadows, Mary Clare's bruise a searing pain, Lilith's whispers now a deafening chant urging her to surrender. Lucia's wound slowed her, but her knife was steady, her eyes scanning for Agnes or worse. The journal's warning echoed in Mary Clare's mind, faith must burn brighter than betrayal, but faith felt like a fading ember, smothered by the well's hunger. They found Sister Eleanor, a frail elderly nun, cowering in a cell, her habit torn, her face streaked with tears. She came, Eleanor whispered, her voice trembling. Agnes. She took Sister Margaret, said the well needed more. Mary Clare's heart sank, the image of Beatrice's carved body flashing through her mind. Where? She asked, her voice firm despite her fear. Eleanor pointed to the chapel, her hand shaking. She's there, with the others. She's changed. Lucia helped Eleanor stand, her voice sharp. Stay here, lock the door. We'll handle this. But Eleanor's eyes fixed on Mary Clare's bruise, widening with terror. You're marked, she gasped. The well wants you. Mary Clare's resolve wavered, but she pushed forward, Lucia at her side. The chapel was a desecrated shrine, its pews overturned, its candles burning with green flames. Agnes stood at the altar, her dagger dripping blood, 3 nuns, Margaret among them, bound and kneeling before her. Her eyes glowed red, her face a twisted parody of holiness. "Welcome, chosen," she said, her voice layered with Lilith's. "Your blood will open the well." Lucia charged, her knife aimed at Agnes's heart, but the Guardian moved with inhuman speed, knocking her to the ground. Mary Clare lunged, grabbing a candlestick and swinging it, but Agnes caught her wrist, twisting until she screamed. The bruise flared, and Lilith's voice surged, "Command, yield." Mary Clare's vision blurred, the well's black water rising in her mind, but she thought of Gabriel, his belief in her, and fought back, her voice rising in a martyr's chant. The chapel shook, the green flames flickering, and Agnes hissed, her grip loosening. Lucia scrambled up, tackling Agnes, and the bound nuns broke free, fleeing into the shadows. Mary Clare kept chanting, her voice a beacon, and the well's hum faltered, its power waning. Agnes screamed, her body convulsing, and a black mist poured from her, forming Isabel's face, her eyes burning with rage. "You cannot stop her," Isabel spat, then vanished, leaving Agnes slumped, human again but broken. Mary Clare helped Lucia stand, their breaths ragged, the chapel stilled but not safe. The nuns were free, but Agnes's ritual had fed the well, and Mary Clare's bruise was a ticking clock. As they staggered back to Gabriel, Act 2 closed with a fragile victory, their faith tested, their losses mounting, and the well's true master, Lilith, still waiting in the depths. The storm over St. Agatha's convent had grown into a maelstrom, its wind screaming like a chorus of the damned, tearing at the Gothic spires as if to rip the convent from its cliffside perch. Inside, the main hall was a wreckage of shattered glass and toppled statues, the air thick with the stench of blood and decay. Father Gabriel leaned against a pillar, his shoulder wound a burning agony, his blood pooling on the stone floor. Sister Mary Clare knelt beside him, her bruise, a web of thorns now encircling her heart, pulsing with Lilith's whispers, each one a dagger to her soul. Sister Lucia, a side wound bound but seeping, gripped her knife, her eyes scanning the shadows for Agnes or worse. The journal, battered and blood-stained, lay open between them, its pages a fragile hope against the world's awakening. Mary Clare's hands trembled as she pressed a torn strip of her habit against Gabriel's wound, her voice soft but urgent. "You're losing too much blood," she said, her green eyes clouded with fear and something deeper, a forbidden love that burned brighter than her pain. Gabriel's hand covered hers, his touch weak but steady. "We're not done yet," he said, his voice a gravelly vow. "The well's still open. We have to end this." Lucia's knife glinted as she paced, her pragmatism eroded by the horrors they'd faced. "End it how?" she snapped, her voice raw. "Ruth's gone, the relic's broken, and Agnes is probably laughing with that thing in the well. We're out of moves." Her words cut, but her eyes betrayed her grief, the loss of Beatrice, Ruth, and the other nuns a weight she could barely carry. Gabriel forced himself to sit up, wincing as he reached for the journal. A passage caught his eye, written in Isabel's trembling hand, "The well's heart lies beneath the convent, where the martyr fell. Only the chosen, marked by faith, can face the hunger." He looked at Mary Clare, his heart sinking. "The chamber we found, it's not the well's true entrance. There's another, deeper. We need to find it." Mary Clare's bruise flared, and she gasped, Lilith's voice surging in her mind, "Come to me, child. Your blood will free me." She clutched Gabriel's hand, her nails digging in, and he held her gaze, his belief in her a shield against the darkness. "You're not hers," he said, his voice fierce. "You're stronger than she knows." A sudden crash echoed from the chapel, followed by a scream, human, desperate. Lucia's knife snapped up. "The sisters we saved," she said, already moving. "They're still in there." Mary Claire helped Gabriel stand, their hands lingering, a silent promise to face the world together. The journal's warning was clear: the well's heart was closed, and Lilith's hunger was growing. As they moved toward the chapel, the convent shook, its walls bleeding black water, a sign that time was running out. The chapel was a desecrated ruin, its pews splintered, its candles burning with green flames. Sister Eleanor and the surviving nuns cowered behind the altar, their faces pale with terror. Agnes stood before them, her habit soaked in blood, her eyes glowing red, a dagger in her hand. "The well demands," she intoned, her voice layered with Lilith's. "And you will give." She raised the dagger, but Lucia charged, her knife slashing, and the two women clashed, blood spraying as they fought. Gabriel and Mary Claire rushed to free the nuns, but the well's hum surged, and the floor cracked, black water seeping through, its hands reaching for Mary Claire. She screamed, her bruise burning, but Gabriel pulled her back, his wounded arm trembling. The chapel was no sanctuary, it was a trap, and Lilith was closing in. The chapel's floor buckled under the well's assault, its black water pooling around the altar, its hands clawing at the air. Father Gabriel shielded Sister Mary Claire, his shoulder wound a fire that threatened to consume him, but his resolve burned brighter. Mary Claire's bruise was a torment, its thorns now a cage around her heart. Lilith's whispers a relentless tide: "Your faith is dust. Surrender, and live." Sister Lucia grappled with Agnes, their knives flashing, blood mixing with the water as the surviving nuns fled, their screams swallowed by the storm. Gabriel pulled Mary Claire behind the crucifix, its wooden Christ staring down with hollow eyes. "We need the chant," he said, his voice strained, fumbling for the journal. Its pages were soaked, but the martyr's chant was still legible, a lifeline in the chaos. "If we can say it at the well's heart, we can bind it." Mary Claire nodded, her voice trembling as she began the Latin words, her faith a flickering flame against Lilith's darkness. Lucia's knife sank into Agnes's arm, but the guardian laughed, her strength inhuman. "You cannot stop her," she hissed, her eyes blazing. She threw Lucia against the altar, the impact cracking stone, and turned to Mary Claire, her dagger raised. Gabriel lunged, tackling Agnes, his wound tearing open, blood soaking his cassock. "Finish the chant," he shouted, struggling to hold Agnes down. Mary Claire's voice rose, the chant weaving through the well's hum, its power stirring the air. The water's hands recoiled, and Agnes shrieked, her body convulsing as if Lilith fought to keep her. Lucia staggered to her feet, grabbing her knife and plunging it into Agnes's shoulder, pinning her to the floor. The guardian's screams merged with the well's, a cacophony of rage and pain. The floor split wider, revealing a stone staircase descending into darkness, its walls etched with thorns and eyes. The journal's words flashed in Gabriel's mind, "The well's heart lies where the martyr fell." "There," he gasped, pointing to the stairs. "That's the path." He helped Mary Claire stand, their hands entwined, their bond a defiance of the well's hunger. Lucia dragged Agnes, still writhing, her blood feeding the water, and the group descended, the chapel collapsing behind them. The staircase was a descent into hell, its air thick with the stench of rot, its walls pulsing like flesh. Mary Claire's chant faltered, Lilith's whispers clawing at her mind, but Gabriel's voice joined hers, their harmony a fragile shield. The stairs ended in a vast cavern, its ceiling lost in shadow, its center dominated by a massive well, its black water churning with faces, Isabel's among them, her eyes burning with betrayal. Agnes broke free, her dagger slashing at Lucia, who fell, clutching her side. Mary Claire's chant grew stronger, and the well's water stilled, but Lilith's voice echoed, "A velvet blade, you cannot bind me. Your blood is mine." The cavern shook, and the faces in the water screamed, a chorus of the damned, as the group realized the truth. The martyr's path led to the well's heart, but it demanded a price they weren't ready to pay. The cavern beneath St. Agatha's was a cathedral of despair, its walls slick with black water, its air alive with the well's hum, now a deafening roar. Father Gabriel stood at the well's edge, his shoulder wound bleeding freely, his vision blurring but his resolve unbroken. Sister Mary Claire clung to the journal, her bruise a searing cage around her heart, Lilith's whispers a storm in her mind, "You are mine, chosen. Bleed, and be free." Sister Lucia lay crumpled near the stairs, her wound grave, her knife lost in the struggle with Agnes, who knelt before the well, her blood dripping into its churning depths, her eyes glowing with Lilith's power. Mary Claire's chant faltered, her voice hoarse, but Gabriel's hand found hers, his touch a spark of light in the darkness. "Keep going," he said, his voice steady despite his pain. "You're the chosen, but not for her. For us." Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the well's roar faded, their love a forbidden flame that burned brighter than their fear. She nodded, resuming the chant, its Latin words echoing off the cavern's walls, a prayer against the abyss. Agnes rose, her dagger flashing, her voice a snarl. "You think your words can stop her? Lilith is eternal." She lunged at Mary Claire, but Gabriel threw himself in front, the blade sinking into his side. He grunted, falling to his knees, blood pooling beneath him. Mary Claire screamed, dropping the journal, her charm breaking as she caught him, her hands slick with his blood. Lucia stirred, crawling toward her knife, her strength fading but her will unbroken. "Finish it," she gasped, her eyes fixed on Mary Claire. "For all of us." She grabbed the knife and threw it, the blade striking Agnes's thigh, slowing her. The guardian laughed, pulling the knife free, her blood feeding the well, its water rising, hands reaching for Mary Claire. Mary Claire's bruise burned, and Lilith's voice surged, vision overwhelming her, a well of endless black, herself standing at its edge, blood dripping from her wrists, Lilith's radiant form rising to embrace her. She staggered, the journal slipping from her grasp, but Gabriel's voice broke through, weak but fierce. "You are enough," he said, his hand gripping hers. "Fight her." She resumed the chant, her voice stronger, and the well's hands recoiled, the water churning with rage. Agnes charged again, but Lucia tackled her, their bodies slamming into the well's edge. The guardian's dagger slashed Lucia's arm, but Lucia held on, her blood mixing with Agnes's, the well drinking deeply. Mary Claire's chant reached a crescendo, and the cavern shook, stalactites falling, the well's faces screaming as Lilith's presence grew, a shadow forming above the water, radiant and terrible. Gabriel pulled himself up, his blood staining the stone, and joined Mary Claire's chant, their voices a defiant harmony. The shadow, Lilith, laughed, her voice a velvet storm. "Your faith is frail," she said, her form solidifying, a woman of impossible beauty, her eyes black as the void. "Bleed, and I will spare your souls." The well surged, its hands wrapping around Mary Clare, and Act III's opening battle began, the Chosen's burden a weight that threatened to break them all. The cavern beneath St. Agatha's convent was a pulsing wound, its walls weeping black water, the well at its heart a churning vortex of faces and screams. Lilith's shadow loomed, her radiant form a mockery of divinity, her black eyes fixed on Sister Mary Clare, whose bruised, thorns encircling her heart, burned with unbearable intensity. Father Gabriel clung to life, his side and shoulder bleeding, his body slumped against the slick stone, yet his hand gripped Mary Clare's, their shared chant a fading echo against Lilith's laughter. Sister Lucia lay near the well's edge, her wounds grave, her strength spent in her struggle with Agnes, who knelt, bloodied but unbowed, her dagger dripping into the water, feeding the well's hunger. Mary Clare's chant faltered, Lilith's voice a velvet storm in her mind, "Bleed for me, chosen, and I will make you whole." The well's hands wrapped tighter around her, their touch cold as death, pulling her toward the water. Her bruise pulsed, visions flooding her, herself, wrists slashed, sinking into the well, Lilith's arms embracing her as the world burned. She screamed, her voice raw, but Gabriel's grip tightened, his blood-slick hand anchoring her to reality. "You're not hers," he gasped, his eyes blazing with a faith she'd nearly lost. "Fight, Mary Clare." Lucia stirred, her knife lost but her will unbroken. She crawled toward Agnes, her blood mixing with the water, and grabbed the guardian's ankle, dragging her back. "You're done," Lucia hissed, her voice a snarl. Agnes laughed, her eyes glowing red, and kicked Lucia away, her dagger flashing as she rose. "The well is open," she sang, her voice Lilith's now. "The chosen will break the seal." Gabriel pulled himself up, his wounds tearing, and joined Mary Clare's chant, their voices weaving a fragile harmony. The journal lay open nearby, its pages glowing faintly, the martyr's chant a beacon in the dark. The well's hands recoiled, and Lilith's form flickered, her laughter turning to a snarl. "Your faith is nothing," she spat, her voice shaking the cavern, stalactites crashing around them. The water surged, its faces, Isabel's, Ruth's, Beatrice's, screaming for release, their hands clawing at Mary Clare. Mary Clare's bruise burned, her body trembling, but Gabriel's presence was a fire in her soul. She leaned into him, their foreheads touching, their chant a shared prayer. "I believe in you," he whispered, his voice breaking, and the words stirred something deep within her, a spark of faith that Lilith couldn't touch. The chant grew stronger, and the well's water stilled, its hands retreating, but Agnes lunged, her dagger aimed at Mary Clare's heart. Lucia threw herself in front, the blade sinking into her chest. She gasped, collapsing, her blood pooling into the well. "Finish it," she whispered, her eyes fixed on Mary Clare, and fell still. Mary Clare's scream tore through the cavern, her chant breaking, but Gabriel's voice held, his strength fading but his will iron. Agnes staggered, weakened by Lucia's sacrifice, and Mary Clare grabbed the journal, resuming the chant, her voice a defiance of grief and fear. The well's hum faltered, and Lilith's form wavered, but the water surged again, its hands wrapping around Agnes, pulling her into its depths. Her screams faded, and the cavern shook, the well's hunger undeterred. Mary Clare clung to Gabriel, their chant a desperate stand, but Lilith's voice echoed, a promise of doom, "You cannot bind me. Your blood is mine." The well's heart was exposed, but the cost of Lucia's death weighed heavy, and the battle was far from won. The cavern's walls pulsed like a beating heart, the well's black water a mirror of torment, reflecting the faces of the lost. Sister Mary Clare stood at its edge, the journal clutched to her chest, her bruise a searing cage that threatened to shatter her. Father Gabriel leaned against her, his wounds bleeding freely, his cassock soaked, yet his voice carried a martyr's chant, a beacon in the darkness. Sister Lucia's body lay near the well, her sacrifice a wound in their souls, her blood feeding the well's hunger. Lilith's radiant form hovered above the water, her beauty a lie, her black eyes boring into Mary Clare, her voice a seductive venom. Join me, chosen. Your faith is dust. Mary Clare's legs buckled, the whispers overwhelming, but Gabriel's arm encircled her, his warmth a shield against Lilith's cold. You're stronger than her, he said, his voice weak but fierce, his blood dripping onto the journal, its pages glowing brighter. The chant resumed, their voices blending, Latin words of sacrifice and redemption echoing off the cavern's walls. The well's hands retreated, and Lilith's form flickered, a snarl a crack in her divine facade. The journal's glow intensified, revealing a hidden passage, written in blood, the martyr's light burns in the chosen's heart. Offer it, and the well will sleep. Mary Clare's eyes widened, the words a revelation. It's not blood, she whispered, her voice trembling with hope. It's faith, my faith. She looked at Gabriel, their bond a flame that Lilith couldn't extinguish, and her chant grew stronger, her voice a clarion call. The cavern shook, stalactites falling, and the well's water churned, its faces screaming in defiance. Lilith's form solidified, her hands reaching for Mary Clare, her voice a thunderclap. You are mine, she roared, and the water surged, its hands wrapping around Mary Clare's legs, pulling her toward the abyss. Gabriel held her, his strength fading, his blood mixing with the water, and their chant faltered, the journal slipping from her grasp. Mary Clare's bruise burned, and Lilith's vision returned, herself, sinking into the well, Lilith's arms a cold embrace. But Gabriel's voice broke through, his chant a desperate plea, and she clung to him, their hands entwined, their faith a shared weapon. She tore her gaze from the well, focusing on Gabriel's eyes, and the chant surged, its power shaking the cavern. The journal's glow flared, and the well's hands released her, retreating as Lilith's form wavered, her scream a howl of rage. A crack split the cavern ceiling, and a faint light, daylight, impossible in the storm, pierced the darkness, illuminating the journal. Mary Clare grabbed it, her chant unbroken, and the light grew, a martyr's light born of her faith. Gabriel's voice joined hers, their harmony a fire that burned through Lilith's shadows. The well's water stilled, its faces fading, but Lilith's voice echoed, a final taunt, you delay me, but you cannot win. The cavern stabilized, but the light faded, and Gabriel collapsed, his wounds too great, leaving Mary Clare to carry the chant alone, her faith the only weapon left. The cavern was a battlefield of light and shadow, the well's black water a silent threat, its surface still but alive with menace. Sister Mary Clare stood alone, the journal glowing in her hands, her bruise a torment that pulsed with Lilith's fading whispers, you cannot hold me forever. Father Gabriel lay at her feet, his wounds bleeding out, his breath shallow, his chant silenced by pain. Sister Lucia's body was a stark reminder of their losses, her sacrifice a fleeting victory against the well's hunger. The martyr's light had driven Lilith back, but the well remained open, its heart exposed but unyielding. Mary Clare's voice carried the chant, her faith a fragile flame against the darkness. The journal's glow was her guide, its words a map to the well's defeat. But her strength was waning, her bruise spreading, each thorn a needle in her soul. She knelt beside Gabriel, her hand on his chest, feeling the faint beat of his heart. "Don't leave me," she whispered, her voice breaking, their love a forbidden anchor that kept her from the well's pull. A low laugh echoed, and the water rippled, parting to reveal Agnes, her habit torn, her body bloodied but alive, her eyes glowing with Lilith's red fire. "You thought me gone," she hissed, her voice a chorus of malice. "The well sustains me." She rose, her dagger gleaming, its blade etched with thorns, and stepped onto the stone, her movements fluid, inhuman. The journal's light dimmed, and Mary Clare's chant faltered, Agnes's presence a weight on her soul. Agnes circled her, her dagger tracing the air. "You're the chosen," she said, her voice Lilith's now. "Your blood will break the seal, and Lilith will rise." She lunged, and Mary Clare dodged, clutching the journal, her chant resuming, weaker but defiant. The well's water stirred, hands reaching for her, and Agnes laughed, her dagger slashing Mary Clare's arm, blood welling. Mary Clare staggered, the pain sharpening her focus, and her chant surged, the journal's glow flaring. The well's hands recoiled, and Agnes shrieked, her body convulsing as the light burned her. Gabriel stirred, his voice a whisper, joining the chant, his faith a spark that fueled Mary Clare's. Their harmony shook the cavern, and the water stilled, Lilith's presence fading, but Agnes charged again, her dagger aimed at Mary Clare's heart. Mary Clare sidestepped, grabbing a fallen stalactite and swinging it, striking Agnes's head. The guardian fell, blood pooling, but her laughter echoed, and the well's hum returned, stronger, angrier. Mary Clare's bruise burned, and Lilith's voice whispered, "A final lure, you cannot save him. Bleed, and he lives." The cavern shook, and Gabriel's hand fell limp, his breath fading, leaving Mary Clare to face Agnes and the well alone, her faith the only weapon against an eternal hunger. The cavern beneath St. Agatha's convent was a crucible of despair, its walls slick with black water, the well at its center a pulsing abyss of screams and shadows. Sister Mary Clare stood alone, the journal glowing faintly in her trembling hands, her bruised, a cage of thorns around her heart, searing with Lilith's relentless whispers, "Bleed, child, and save him." Father Gabriel lay motionless at her feet, his wounds bleeding out, his breath a faint rattle, his life slipping away. Sister Lucia's body was a silent testament to their losses, her sacrifice swallowed by the well's hunger. Agnes, the guardian, lay crumpled from Mary Clare's blow, but her blood-soaked form twitched, her red eyes flickering with Lilith's undying malice. Mary Clare's chant was a broken thread, her voice hoarse, her faith battered by grief and pain. The journal's words, "The martyr's light burns in the chosen's heart," echoed in her mind, a call to resist Lilith's law. She knelt beside Gabriel, her bloodied hand on his chest, feeling the faint pulse of his heart. "I won't let you go," she whispered, her tears falling onto his face, their love a forbidden flame that burned brighter than the well's darkness. Agnes stirred, her laughter a jagged blade. "You cannot save him," she hissed, her voice Lilith's, her dagger glinting as she rose, blood dripping from her wounds. "The well demands your blood, chosen. Give it, and he lives." She lunged, her movements jerky but swift, the dagger aimed at Mary Clare's throat. Mary Clare rolled, clutching the journal, and swung the stalactite again, striking Agnes's arm. The guardian shrieked, her dagger clattering to the stone, but the well's water surged, its hands wrapping around Mary Clare's ankles, pulling her toward the abyss. The bruise burned, and Lilith's vision returned, Mary Clare, sinking into the well, Gabriel's lifeless body left behind, Lilith's radiant arms embracing her. She screamed, a chant resuming, Latin words of defiance tearing from her throat. The journal's glow flared, and the well's hands recoiled, the water churning with rage. Agnes staggered, weakened by the chant, but her eyes glowed brighter, Lilith's power surging through her. You delay me, she snarled, but you cannot win. Mary Claire's eyes locked on Gabriel's face, his faith in her a spark that refused to die. She stood, the journal raised, a chant a clarion call. The cavern shook, stalactites falling, and the well's faces, Isabel's, Ruth's, Lucia's, screamed, their anguish a chorus against Lilith's laughter. The journal's light burned brighter, a martyr's light born of Mary Claire's defiance, and Agnes faltered, her body convulsing as the well's hold weakened. But the water surged again, its hands clawing at Mary Claire, and Lilith's voice roared, a storm of fury, you are mine. Mary Claire's bruise pulsed, her strength fading, but she thought of Gabriel's words, you are enough, and her chant grew stronger, her faith a blade against the darkness. The well's hum faltered, and Agnes fell to her knees, her dagger slipping into the water, but the cavern's walls cracked, black water flooding in, threatening to drown them all. Mary Claire's defiance was a beacon, but the well's hunger was relentless, and Gabriel's life hung by a thread. The cavern was a collapsing tomb, its walls buckling under the well's wrath, black water rising like a tide of despair. Sister Mary Claire stood at the well's edge, the journal's glow a fading star in her hands, her bruise a torment that threatened to shatter her soul. Father Gabriel's breath was barely a whisper, his blood pooling beneath him, his life a fragile thread in her grasp. Agnes knelt, her body racked with convulsions, Lilith's red eyes dimming but not extinguished, her blood feeding the well's churning depths. The martyr's chant echoed, Mary Claire's voice alone defiance against Lilith's radiant form, hovering above the water, her black eyes a void of eternal hunger. Mary Claire's legs trembled, her bruise pulsing with Lilith's whispers, your faith is frail. Bleed, and he lives. The well's hands reached for her, their touch a cold promise of oblivion, but she clung to the journal, its words a lifeline, the martyr's heart burns brighter than betrayal. She looked at Gabriel, his face pale, his eyes closed, and her heart ached with a love that defied their vows. I won't lose you, she said, her voice breaking, and resumed the chant, Latin words weaving a shield of faith. The journal's glow surged, a martyr's light that burned through the cavern's shadows, and the well's hands recoiled, the water stilling for a moment. Lilith's form flickered, her laughter turning to a scream, and Agnes clutched her head, her body twisting as Lilith's power fought to hold her. You cannot bind me. Lilith roared, her voice shaking the cavern, stones falling from the ceiling. The water surged again, its faces screaming, and Mary Claire's bruise burned, a vision flashing, herself, standing at the well's edge, Gabriel's blood on her hands, Lilith rising triumphant. She staggered, the chant faltering, but Gabriel's hand twitched, his fingers brushing hers. His eyes opened, weak but alive, and his voice joined hers, a faint echo of the chant. Together, he whispered, and their harmony reignited the journal's light, a blaze that drove Lilith's shadow back. The well's hum weakened, and Agnes screamed, her body collapsing, blood pouring from her wounds into the water, no longer feeding it but poisoning it. Mary Claire's faith burned brighter, her love for Gabriel a martyr's heart that Lilith couldn't touch. The chant reached a crescendo, and the cavern's walls glowed, thorns and ice fading as the journal's light spread. Lilith's form wavered, her scream a howl of rage, and the well's water began to recede, its faces dissolving. but the cavern shook violently, the ceiling cracking, and a flood of black water poured in, threatening to drown them. Mary Clare pulled Gabriel close, their bodies pressed together, their chant unbroken. The journal's light flared, a final burst that drove Lilith's shadow into the well, her scream fading. Agnes's body stilled, her eyes human again, empty of Lilith's fire. The water retreated, but the cavern was collapsing, and Gabriel's strength was gone, his weight heavy in Mary Clare's arms. Her faith had burned bright, but the well's heart remained, and the price of their defiance was yet to be paid. The cavern was a dying beast, its walls crumbling, black water pooling in its crevices, the well at its center a silent threat, its surface still but alive with malice. Sister Mary Clare held Father Gabriel, his body limp in her arms, his wounds bleeding out, his breath a faint whisper. The journal lay open beside them, its glow dimming, the martyr's chant a fading echo in the air. Agnes's body was a broken shell, her blood no longer feeding the well, her role as guardian ended. Lilith's radiant form was gone, driven back by the martyr's light, but her whispers lingered in Mary Clare's mind, soft and insidious, "You've only delayed me. Your blood is mine." Mary Clare's bruise was a fire, its thorns now a noose around her soul, each pulse a call to the well. She clutched Gabriel, her tears falling onto his face, her love a flame that kept her from breaking. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice raw, but his eyes were closed, his pulse fading. The cavern's collapse slowed, but the air was thick, oppressive, as if the well itself held its breath. She scanned the journal, desperate for a way to seal the well, and found a final passage, written in blood. The chosen's heart must face the well, not with blood but with surrender to faith. Her heart sank, the word, surrender, a weight she couldn't bear. She looked at the well, its water still, but the faces lingered just below, waiting. Lilith's voice whispered, "Allure, give yourself, and he lives. Deny me, and all is lost." Mary Clare's faith wavered, the weight of Lucia's death, Ruth's sacrifice, and Gabriel's fading life crushing her. But his words echoed, "You are enough," and she stood, the journal in one hand, Gabriel's hand in the other. She resumed the chant, her voice lone but resolute, Latin words a prayer for salvation. The journal's glow flickered, and the well's water rippled, a single hand reaching out, not clawing but beckoning. A low hum answered, and the cavern's walls glowed faintly, thorns reappearing, eyes watching. Agnes's body twitched, her hand moving, and Mary Clare's heart stopped. The guardian wasn't dead, Lilith's power lingered, a final trap. Agnes rose, her eyes empty but her dagger in hand, her movements puppet-like. "The well calls," she whispered, her voice a hollow echo, and lunged at Mary Clare. Mary Clare dodged, pulling Gabriel's body away, her chant unbroken. The journal's light flared, and Agnes shrieked, her body collapsing again, but the well's hand grew stronger, wrapping around Mary Clare's wrist, pulling her toward the water. Her bruise burned, and Lilith's voice roared, a final command, "Surrender." The cavern shook, stones falling, and Mary Clare's chant faltered, her faith teetering on the edge as the well's final call threatened to claim her soul. The cavern beneath St. Agatha's convent was a collapsing nightmare, its walls fracturing under the well's relentless fury, black water seeping through every crack like blood from a mortal wound. Sister Mary Clare stood at the well's edge, the journal's faint glow her only light, her bruised, a cage of thorns tightening around her soul, pulsing with Lilith's seductive whispers, "Surrender, chosen, and all will be spared." Father Gabriel lay limp in her arms, his wounds bleeding out, his breath a barely audible rasp, his life a fragile thread she clung to with desperate faith. Agnes's body, once the guardian, lay still, her dagger sunk into the stone, but the well's hum surged, a living force that mocked their resistance. Mary Clare's chant was a faltering prayer, her voice raw, her body trembling from exhaustion and pain. The journal's words, "The chosen's heart must face the well with surrender to faith," burned in her mind, the word surrender, a paradox she couldn't unravel. Lilith's voice was a velvet trap, promising Gabriel's life, the convent's salvation, if she offered her blood. The well's hand, cold and insistent, gripped her wrist, pulling her closer, its black water churning with faces, Isabel's, Ruth's, Lucia's, screaming for release. She clutched Gabriel, her tears falling onto his bloodied face, their love a forbidden anchor that kept her from the abyss. "I can't lose you," she whispered, her voice breaking, but his silence was a weight crushing her faith. The cavern shook, stones falling, and the well's water rose, its hands multiplying, wrapping around her legs, their touch a promise of eternal darkness. Her bruise burned, and Lilith's vision surged, Mary Clare, standing in the well, blood dripping from her wrists, Lilith's radiant form rising to consume the world. Mary Clare's knees buckled, the journal slipping from her grasp, but Gabriel's hand twitched, his fingers brushing hers. His eyes fluttered open, weak but alive, and his voice, barely a whisper, joined her chant, a Latin fragment that sparked her resolve. "You're enough," he gasped, and the words reignited her faith, a flame that Lilith couldn't extinguish. She grabbed the journal, her chant surging, its Latin words a defiance of the well's hunger. The journal's glow flared, a martyr's light that burned through the cavern's shadows, and the well's hands recoiled, the water churning with rage. Lilith's voice roared, a storm of fury, "You cannot deny me." The cavern's walls cracked wider, black water flooding in, threatening to drown them. Mary Clare pulled Gabriel closer, their bodies pressed together, their chant a shared shield. The journal's light spread, illuminating the well, and the faces within faded, their screams weakening. But Agnes's body stirred, her hand reaching for the dagger, her eyes glowing red once more. "The well endures," she hissed, her voice Lilith's, and lunged, the dagger flashing. Mary Clare dodged, shielding Gabriel, and swung the journal, its glow striking Agnes like a physical blow. The guardian shrieked, her body convulsing, and the dagger sank into the water, swallowed by the well. The cavern shook violently, and Mary Clare's chant reached a crescendo, her faith a blade that cut through Lilith's hold, but the well's final call was unrelenting, and surrender loomed as her only path. The cavern was a maelstrom of light and shadow, the well's black water a churning vortex that threatened to swallow all hope. Sister Mary Clare stood defiant, the journal's martyr's light blazing in her hands, her bruise a searing torment that pulsed with Lilith's fading whispers, "You delay me, but you are mine." Father Gabriel clung to life, his body cradled in her arms, his wounds bleeding out, his faint chant a thread of faith that bound them together. Agnes's body lay broken, her role as guardian ended, but the well's hum was a living thing, its hunger undeterred by the light. Mary Clare's chant was a fire, her voice raw but unwavering, the journal's words, surrender to faith, not blood, a revelation that fueled her resistance. The well's hands retreated, the water stilling, and the cavern's walls glowed faintly, thorns and eyes dissolving under the martyr's light. Lilith's radiant form flickered above the well, her black eyes narrowing, her voice a velvet snarl, "You cannot bind me. The truth will break you." The journal's glow pulsed, and a new page appeared, its ink fresh, as if written by an unseen hand. Mary Clare's eyes widened, the words a shock, Isabel was no martyr. She betrayed the seal, offering her blood to Lilith for power. The well claimed her, but her soul remains, bound to serve. The truth hit like a blade. Isabel, the nun they'd thought a victim, was Lilith's first chosen, her spirit a pawn in the well's game. Mary Clare's faith wavered, the weight of Isabel's betrayal crushing. She looked at the well, its water rippling, and Isabel's face appeared, not screaming but smiling, her eyes glowing with Lilith's fire. "Join me," Isabel whispered, her voice a chorus with Lilith's. "We are the same, chosen. Bleed, and rule." The well's hands surged, wrapping around Mary Clare's waist, pulling her toward the water, and her bruise burned, a vision flashing, Isabel, kneeling at the well, her blood opening it, Lilith rising to claim her soul. Mary Clare screamed, her chant faltering, but Gabriel's voice, weak but fierce, broke through. "You're not her," he gasped, his hand gripping hers, his blood staining her skin. Their eyes locked, their love a flame that burned through the vision, and she resumed the chant, her voice stronger, the journal's light flaring. The well's hands recoiled, and Isabel's face dissolved, her scream merging with Lilith's rage. The cavern ceiling cracked, daylight piercing the darkness, a miracle in the storm. The journal's light spread, and the well's water began to recede, its hum weakening. Lilith's form wavered, a scream, a howl of defiance, and the cavern stabilized, but Gabriel's breath faltered, his pulse slowing. Mary Clare clutched him, her chant unbroken, but the truth of Isabel's betrayal was a wound in her soul. The well's heart was exposed, but Lilith's power lingered, and the chosen's path demanded a sacrifice Mary Clare wasn't ready to make. The cavern beneath St. Agatha's was a fragile sanctuary, its walls scarred but still, the well's black water a silent threat, its surface rippling with the ghosts of its victims. Sister Mary Clare held Father Gabriel, his body heavy in her arms, his wounds bleeding out, his breath a faint whisper that tore at her heart. The journal's martyr's light dimmed, its pages stained with their blood, the chant a fading echo in the air. Lilith's radiant form was gone, driven back by the truth of Isabel's betrayal, but her whispers lingered in Mary Clare's bruise, a soft law, "You cannot seal me. Your blood is the key." Mary Clare's faith was a battered shield, her bruise a torment that pulsed with each heartbeat, the well's call a siren song she could barely resist. She clutched Gabriel, her tears falling, their love a forbidden anchor that kept her from surrendering. The journal's final passage, "The chosen's faith must bind the keeper, not the well," was a riddle she couldn't solve. The keeper, Isabel, Agnes, or something worse? The cavern shook, and the well's water surged, a single figure rising from its depths, not Lilith, but Isabel, her tattered veil dripping blood, her eyes glowing with a sorrowful fire. "You see me now," she said, her voice soft but layered with Lilith's malice. "I was chosen, like you. I betrayed the seal, and now I keep it, bound to Lilith's will." Her hand reached out, not clawing but pleading, and Mary Clare's bruise burned, a vision flashing, Isabel, trapped in a well, her soul a chain that held Lilith at bay. Mary Clare's chant resumed, her voice trembling but defiant, the journal's light flaring. "You're not my fate," she said, her eyes fixed on Isabel. "I won't betray them." Gabriel's hand twitched, his voice a whisper, joining her chant, their harmony a spark that burned through the cavern's shadows. The well's water stilled, and Isabel's form wavered, her eyes human for a moment, filled with regret. But the cavern's walls cracked, and black water poured in, the well's hum returning, stronger, angrier. Isabel's voice shifted, Lilith's now, a snarl of rage, "You cannot free her. The keeper is mine. The well's hand surged, wrapping around Mary Clare, pulling her toward the water. She clutched Gabriel, her chant unbroken, but her strength was fading, her bruiser fire that threatened to consume her. A low groan came from Agnes's body, and Mary Clare's heart stopped. The guardian rose, her wounds healed, her eyes glowing red, her voice Lilith's. "The keeper serves me," she hissed, and lunged, her hands clawing at Mary Clare. The journal's light flared, and Mary Clare swung it, striking Agnes, but the guardian's strength was inhuman, her grip tightening. Gabriel's chant faltered, his breath stopping, and Mary Clare screamed, her faith teetering as the well's keeper, Isabel and Agnes, closed in, and Lilith's final trap snapped shut. The cavern beneath St. Agatha's convent was a crumbling mausoleum, its walls fracturing under the well's relentless fury, black water flooding the stone floor like a rising tide of despair. Sister Mary Clare stood at the well's heart, the journal's martyr's light a flickering ember in her bloodied hands, her bruise, a web of thorns strangling her soul, pulsing with Lilith's venomous whispers, "Surrender, chosen, and all will end." Father Gabriel lay motionless in her arms, his wounds bleeding out, his breath stopped, his life a fragile thread she refused to let break. Isabel's spectral form hovered above the well, a tattered veil dripping blood, her eyes a mix of sorrow and Lilith's fire, while Agnes, the guardian, loomed before Mary Clare, her red glowing eyes and inhuman strength a testament to Lilith's hold. Mary Clare's chant was a desperate prayer, her voice raw, her faith battered by the weight of Gabriel's silence. The journal's riddle, the chosen's faith must bind the keeper, burned in her mind, Isabel's betrayal a key to the well's defeat. "You're not her slave," Mary Clare said, her voice trembling but defiant, her eyes locked on Isabel. "You can choose again." The journal's light flared, and Isabel's form wavered, her human eyes flickering, a spark of regret breaking through Lilith's control. Agnes laughed, her voice a chorus with Lilith's, her claws slashing at Mary Clare. "The keeper is bound," she snarled, her grip tightening on Mary Clare's arm, blood welling where her nails dug in. The well's hand surged, wrapping around Mary Clare's waist, pulling her toward the churning water, its faces, Ruth's, Lucia's, Beatrice's, screaming in torment. Mary Clare's bruise burned, and Lilith's vision flashed, herself, sinking into the well, Gabriel's body left behind, Lilith rising to consume all. She clutched the journal, her chant surging, Latin words of redemption tearing from her throat. The light burned brighter, and Isabel's form shuddered, her hands reaching out, not to harm but to plead. "Free me," Isabel whispered, her voice her own, and Mary Clare's heart ached, seeing the nun's trapped soul. She shifted her chant, weaving Isabel's name into the Latin, a call to break Lilith's chains. The journal's light spread, and the well's hands recoiled, the water stilling for a moment. Agnes shrieked, her body convulsing, and lunged again, but Mary Clare dodged, pulling Gabriel's body away, her chant unbroken. The cavern shook, stalactites falling, and Isabel's form solidified, her eyes human now, tears of blood streaming. "Forgive me," she said, and reached for Agnes, her spectral hands gripping the guardian's shoulders. Agnes screamed, her red eyes dimming, and the well's hum faltered, Lilith's presence weakening. But the water surged, a final assault, its hands wrapping around Mary Clare and Isabel, pulling them toward the abyss. Mary Clare's faith held, a chant of fire that burned through the darkness, and Isabel's form glowed, a martyr's light of her own. The well's faces faded, and Lilith's voice roared, a desperate snarl, "You cannot take her from me." The cavern's walls cracked, black water flooding in, and Mary Clare clung to Gabriel, her chant a lifeline as Isabel's sacrifice began to bind the keeper, but the well's hunger was unrelenting, and the cost was yet to be paid. The cavern was a collapsing inferno, its walls crumbling under the well's wrath, black water rising like a flood of despair. Sister Mary Clare stood defiant, the journal's martyr's light a blazing star in her hands, her bruise a searing torment that pulsed with Lilith's fading whispers, "You cannot win. Your blood is mine." Father Gabriel's body was still, his wounds a silent scream, his life gone, leaving Mary Clare alone to face the well's heart. Isabel's spectral form glowed beside her, her human eyes filled with sorrow, her hands still gripping Agnes, whose body convulsed, Lilith's red fire dimming but not extinguished. The well's water churned, its hands retreating, but Lilith's presence lingered, a shadow waiting to strike. Mary Clare's chant was a clarion call, her voice raw but unwavering, weaving Isabel's redemption into the Latin words of the martyr's chant. The journal's light burned through the cavern, dissolving thorns and eyes, a martyr's light born of faith and sacrifice. Isabel's form shone brighter, her voice joining Mary Clare's, a harmony that shook the well's foundations. "I choose again," Isabel said, her words a vow, and her light flared, driving Lilith's shadow deeper into the water. Agnes screamed, her body twisting, and collapsed, her eyes human again, empty of Lilith's fire. The well's hum weakened, and the water began to recede, its faces dissolving, their screams fading. Mary Clare's bruise pulsed, but the pain lessened, the thorns retreating slightly, a sign of Lilith's waning power. She knelt beside Gabriel, her hand on his chest, searching for a pulse that wasn't there. "Come back," she whispered, her tears falling, their love a flame that burned through her grief. The cavern ceiling cracked, daylight piercing the darkness, a faint hope in the storm. The journal's light spread, and Isabel's form began to fade, her eyes meeting Mary Clare's. "You freed me," she said, her voice soft, and her spectral hands reached for the well, pulling at an unseen chain. The water shuddered, a crack splitting its surface, and Lilith's voice roared, a desperate howl, "You cannot bind me." The well's hands surged, wrapping around Isabel, pulling her into the depths, but her light held, a martyr's sacrifice that weakened the well's hold. Mary Clare's chant reached a crescendo, her faith a blade that cut through Lilith's shadows. The cavern stabilized, but the journal's light dimmed, its pages crumbling, and her bruise flared, a final warning. She clutched Gabriel's body, her voice breaking, and the well's water rippled, a single hand reaching out, not for her but for him. Lilith's voice whispered, a final law, "Give your blood, and he lives." Mary Clare's faith wavered, the price of Isabel's sacrifice clear, the well was weakened, but not sealed, and Gabriel's death was a wound she couldn't bear. The cavern beneath St. Agatha's was a fragile battlefield, its walls scarred but still, the well's black water a silent abyss, its surface rippling with Lilith's lingering malice. Sister Mary Clare knelt beside Father Gabriel's lifeless body, her bruise a fading torment, the thorns retreating but not gone, Lilith's whispers a faint echo, "Your blood, chosen, or all is lost." The journal lay in ashes, its martyr's light extinguished, Isabel's sacrifice a fleeting victory that had bound the keeper but not the well. Agnes's body was still, her role as guardian ended, but the well's hum returned, a low, insidious pulse that promised Lilith's return. Mary Clare's faith was a battered flame, her love for Gabriel a fire that kept her from breaking. She clutched his hand, cold and still, her tears falling as she whispered, "I'm not done fighting." The well's hand hovered above him, its fingers beckoning, and Lilith's voice surged, a final command: bleed, and he lives. Deny me, and he is mine. The cavern's walls glowed faintly, thorns reappearing, a sign that the well's heart remained open. She stood, her voice rising in the martyr's chant, Latin words of defiance and redemption, a lone prayer against the abyss. The well's water churned, and Lilith's radiant form reappeared, weaker but unbowed, her black eyes fixed on Mary Clare. You delayed me, she said, her voice a velvet storm, but the well endures. Your blood is the seal. The water surged, its hands multiplying, wrapping around Mary Clare, pulling her toward the abyss. Mary Clare's bruise flared, and her chant faltered, the weight of Gabriel's death crushing her. But his words echoed, "You are enough," and she tore free, her faith reigniting, her voice a clarion call. The well's hands recoiled, and Lilith's form flickered, her scream a howl of rage. The cavern shook, stones falling, and a faint glow pulsed from Gabriel's body, a spark of light where his blood had pooled, as if his faith lingered, a martyr's heart that joined hers. She grabbed the journal's ashes, scattering them into the well, a chant of fire that burned through Lilith's shadows. The water stilled, and Lilith's form wavered, her eyes narrowing. You cannot seal me, she snarled, but the glow from Gabriel's blood spread, a martyr's light that drove her back. The well's hum faltered, and the hands retreated, the faces dissolving, their screams fading. Mary Clare's chant reached a crescendo, her faith a blade that cut through the well's heart. The cavern stabilized, but the water rippled, a final hand reaching for her, Lilith's voice a whisper, "This is not the end." She collapsed beside Gabriel, her strength gone, her bruise fading but not healed, the well quiet but not sealed. Act 3 closed with a fragile victory, Gabriel's death a wound that fueled her resolve, and Lilith's promise a shadow that loomed over their final stand. The cavern beneath St. Agatha's convent was a shattered relic of its former terror, its walls scarred and still, the well at its center a silent abyss, its black water rippling with the faintest echo of Lilith's malice. Sister Mary Clare knelt beside Father Gabriel's lifeless body, her hands stained with his blood, her bruised, a fading web of thorns around her heart, pulsing with a dull ache. Lilith's whispers now a faint murmur, "You cannot seal me forever." The journal's ashes lay scattered across the stone, its martyr's light extinguished, Isabel's sacrifice and Agnes's defeat a fragile victory that had quieted the well but not closed it. The cavern's air was thick, oppressive, as if the convent itself mourned the losses that had brought them here. Mary Clare's faith was a battered ember, her love for Gabriel a fire that burned through her grief. She clutched his cold hand, her tears falling onto his face, his words, "You are enough," a haunting echo that fueled her resolve. The well's final hand had retreated, Lilith's radiant form driven back, but her promise lingered, a shadow that threatened to rise again. The cavern's walls bore faint thorns, a reminder that the well's heart remained open, its hunger sated but not vanquished. She rose, her legs trembling, her habit torn and bloodied. The journal's final riddle, the chosen's faith must bind the keeper, not the well, was a weight she carried alone. Isabel, the keeper, had been freed, her soul released by Mary Clare's chant, but the well's seal required more, a sacrifice she wasn't sure she could make. Lilith's voice whispered, a soft law, "Your blood, chosen, will end this, or all will fall." The cavern shook, a low hum rising from the well, and Mary Clare's bruise flared, a warning that time was running out. She scanned the chamber, her eyes falling on a cracked stone slab near the well, its surface etched with a single word, "Sanguis." Blood. Her heart sank, the journal's ashes stirring in a sudden gust, as if urging her to act. She knelt by Gabriel, her hand on his chest, searching for a miracle that wasn't there. "I'll finish this," she whispered, her voice breaking, a vow to the man who'd believed in her. A faint glow pulsed from Gabriel's blood, a spark of the martyr's light that had burned in the journal. Mary Claire's breath caught, and she touched it, her fingers trembling. The glow spread, illuminating a hidden crevice in the slab, revealing a small, silver reliquary, its surface etched with thorns and crosses. She pried it open, finding a shard of bone, another relic, smaller than the one they'd lost, but warm with power. Her faith flickered, a spark of hope, and she clutched it, its warmth a reminder of Gabriel's sacrifice. The well's hum grew louder, and the water rippled, a single face appearing, not Isabel's, but Lilith's, her black eyes glinting. "You delay me," she purred, her voice a velvet threat. "But the seal requires your heart." Mary Claire stood, the reliquary in one hand, Gabriel's hand in the other, a chant resuming, a lone prayer against the abyss. The cavern's walls glowed, thorns fading, but the well's hunger stirred. An Act 4 began with a fragile hope, Mary Claire's faith the only weapon left to seal the darkness. The cavern was a fragile battlefield, its walls trembling under the well's awakening hum, black water seeping through the cracks like tears of the damned. Sister Mary Claire stood at the well's edge, the silver reliquary glowing in her hand, its shard of bone a pulse of warmth against her blooded fingers. Her bruise ached, a fading torment, Lilith's whispers a soft echo, "Your blood is the seal. Bleed, and end this." Father Gabriel's body lay behind her, his blood a silent testament to their losses, his faith a spark that lived in her. The well's surface rippled, Lilith's face lingering just below, her black eyes a promise of eternal hunger. Mary Claire's chant was a steady flame, Latin words of redemption weaving through the cavern's oppressive air. The reliquary's glow intensified, a martyr's light that burned through the shadows, its power a mirror to the journal's lost light. She held it aloft, her voice rising, and the well's hum faltered, the water stilling for a moment. The thorns on the walls faded, and the cavern's ceiling cracked, a faint daylight piercing the darkness, a sign that the storm above was breaking. Lilith's voice surged, a velvet storm, "You cannot bind me with relics. Your faith is frail." The water churned, hands reaching for Mary Claire, their touch cold and greedy. Her bruise flared, and a vision flashed, herself, standing in the well, the reliquary crumbling, Lilith rising to claim the world. She staggered, her chant faltering, but Gabriel's words echoed, "You are enough," and she gripped the reliquary, its warmth grounding her. The cavern shook, and a low groan came from the shadows. Mary Claire spun, her heart stopping as Agnes's body stirred, her wounds healed, her eyes glowing red with Lilith's fire. "The well endures," Agnes hissed, her voice a chorus of malice, and rose, her movements fluid, inhuman. She lunged, her claws slashing at Mary Claire, who dodged, the reliquary's light flaring, burning Agnes's skin. The guardian shrieked, retreating, but the well's hands multiplied, wrapping around Mary Claire's legs, pulling her toward the water. Mary Claire's chant surged, her voice a defiance of fear, and the reliquary's light spread, driving the hands back. Agnes charged again, her claws grazing Mary Claire's arm, blood welling, but the reliquary's glow burned brighter, and Agnes fell, her body convulsing. The well's water stilled, and Lilith's face appeared, her eyes narrowing. "You delay me," she snarled, "but the seal requires your heart." Mary Claire knelt by Gabriel, her blood dripping onto his, and the reliquary pulsed, its light merging with the glow from his blood. A vision flashed, not Lilith's, but Gabriel's, his voice a whisper, faith, not blood. She stood, a chant a clarion call, and the cavern's walls glowed, thorns dissolving, but the well's hum returned, stronger, angrier. Agnes rose again, her eyes blazing, and Mary Clare realized the truth. The reliquary's power was her faith, but the well's seal demanded more, a sacrifice she couldn't escape. The cavern beneath St. Agatha's was a dying shrine, its walls scarred by the well's wrath, black water pooling in its crevices, the well itself a silent vortex of malice. Sister Mary Clare stood defiant, the reliquary's martyr's light a blazing star in her hands, her bruise a dull ache, Lilith's whispers a fading lure, your heart, chosen, or all is lost. Father Gabriel's body was a wound in her soul, his blood a sacred mark that fueled her resolve. Agnes loomed before her, her red eyes flickering, Lilith's power waning but not gone, her claws poised to strike. Mary Clare's chant was a fire, Latin words of sacrifice and redemption echoing off the cavern's walls, the reliquary's light burning through the darkness. The well's hum weakened, and the water stilled, its hands retreating, Lilith's face fading below the surface. The cavern ceiling glowed with faint daylight, a promise of salvation, but the thorns on the walls lingered, a sign that the well's heart remained open. Agnes laughed, her voice a jagged blade. You think your light can seal me, she hissed, her body trembling with Lilith's rage. She lunged, her claws slashing at Mary Clare, who raised the reliquary, its light flaring, burning Agnes's flesh. The guardian shrieked, falling to her knees, but the well's water surged, a single hand reaching for Mary Clare, its touch a cold promise of oblivion. Mary Clare's bruise pulsed, and Lilith's voice whispered, a final trap, bleed, and he returns. She glanced at Gabriel, his lifeless form a weight on her heart, and her faith wavered, the reliquary's light dimming. But his words, you are enough, burned through her doubt, and she resumed the chant, her voice stronger, the light flaring anew. The well's hand recoiled, and Agnes's eyes dimmed, her body collapsing, human again, her breath a ragged gasp. The cavern shook, and the reliquary pulsed, its warmth spreading through Mary Clare's body, a martyr's heart that matched her own. She knelt by the well, the journal's ashes stirring, and a vision flashed, a woman, not Isabel, but a martyr, standing at the well, her faith sealing it centuries ago. Mary Clare's chant reached a crescendo, and the reliquary's light spread, illuminating the well, its water clear for a moment, free of faces. Lilith's voice roared, a desperate snarl, you cannot take me. The water surged, hands clawing at Mary Clare, but she held the reliquary aloft, her faith a blade that cut through the darkness. Agnes stirred, her voice a whisper, finish it. The cavern's walls glowed, thorns fading, but the well's hum returned, a final challenge, and Mary Clare knew the seal required her heart, not blood, but a sacrifice she was ready to make. The cavern was a fragile crucible, its walls trembling under the well's fading hum, black water receding but still alive with Lilith's malice. Sister Mary Clare stood at the well's heart, the reliquary's martyr's light a radiant flame in her hands, her bruise a faint ache, Lilith's whispers silenced but not gone. Father Gabriel's body lay behind her, his blood a sacred mark that anchored her faith, his love a fire that burned through her grief. Agnes lay crumpled, her human eyes empty, her role as guardian ended, but the well's surface rippled, a shadow lingering below, Lilith's final stand. Mary Clare's chant was a clarion call, Latin words of redemption and sacrifice weaving through the cavern's air, the reliquary's light a martyr's heart that matched her own. The well's hum faltered, and the water cleared, its face is gone, the thorns on the walls dissolving. The cavern ceiling glowed with daylight, the storm above breaking, a sign that salvation was near. But the reliquary grew heavy, its warmth a demand, and Mary Clare's heart sank, the journal's riddle clear, the chosen's heart must seal the well. Lilith's voice whispered, a final law, your heart, chosen, or I rise again. The water rippled, a single hand reaching out, not for Mary Clare but for the reliquary, its fingers claw-like. She clutched it, her chant unbroken, but her bruise pulsed, a warning that the seal was incomplete. She knelt by Gabriel, her hand on his chest, and the reliquary's light merged with his blood, a vision flashing, the martyr, sealing the well with her life, her faith a sacrifice that bound Lilith for centuries. Mary Clare's faith burned brighter, her love for Gabriel a martyr's heart that Lilith couldn't touch. She stood, the reliquary raised, and her chant reached a crescendo, the light spreading through the cavern, illuminating every crack. The well's water stilled, and Lilith's shadow appeared, weaker, her black eyes desperate. You cannot do this, she snarled, her voice a fading storm. Your heart will break. Agnes stirred, her voice a whisper, do it, child. Mary Clare's eyes widened, seeing not Lilith's pawn but a woman, broken by centuries of servitude. She nodded, her chant a vow, and stepped toward the well, the reliquary burning in her hands. The water surged, hands clawing at her, but the light held, driving them back. She pressed the reliquary to her chest, its warmth merging with her heartbeat, and the cavern shook, the well's hum silencing. Mary Clare's bruise faded, her faith a fire that sealed the well's heart. The water cleared, Lilith's shadow dissolving, her scream a distant echo. The reliquary crumbled, its light fading, and Mary Clare collapsed, her strength gone, the seal complete but at a cost she couldn't yet fathom. The cavern stilled, and Act 4's resolution began, a sacrifice that bound the well but left Mary Clare alone with her grief. The cavern beneath St. Agatha's convent was a silent tomb, its walls etched with fading scars, the well at its center a still, black mirror, its surface free of Lilith's shadow but heavy with her lingering malice. Sister Mary Clare lay crumpled beside Father Gabriel's lifeless body, her hands empty, the reliquary's ashes scattered across the stone, its martyr's light extinguished in the act of sealing the well. Her bruise was gone, the thorns that had caged her heart dissolved, but the ache remained, a wound carved by loss and sacrifice. The cavern's air was still, the storm above silenced, daylight filtering through cracks in the ceiling, a fragile promise of peace. Mary Clare's faith was a quiet ember, her love for Gabriel a flame that burned through her exhaustion. She clutched his cold hand, her tears dry, his words, "You are enough," a mantra that had carried her through the well's final assault. The journal's riddle, the chosen's heart must seal the well, had demanded not her blood, but her faith, a surrender of everything she was to bind Lilith's hunger. The reliquary's shard had been the key, its light merging with her heart, sealing the well's heart in a moment of blinding clarity. She rose, her body trembling, her habit torn and bloodied. The well's water was clear, its faces, Isabel's, Ruth's, Lucia's, Beatrice's, gone, their souls released by her sacrifice. Agnes's body lay still, her human eyes closed, her centuries of servitude ended. But the cavern's walls bore faint echoes of thorns, a whisper of Lilith's voice, "This is not the end." Mary Clare's heart sank, the seal complete but fragile, a barrier that could one day break. She knelt by Gabriel, her hand on his chest, searching for a pulse that would never return. "We did it," she whispered, her voice breaking, a vow to the man who'd given everything. The cavern's daylight grew stronger, illuminating a stone slab near the well, its surface now smooth, the word sanguis erased. A faint hum pulsed from the well, not Lilith's but something softer, a sigh of release, as if the martyr's spirit lingered, watching. Mary Clare's eyes fell on a small, leather-bound book, hidden in the rubble, a new journal, its pages blank but warm, as if waiting. She picked it up, her fingers trembling, and a vision flashed, the martyr, sealing the well centuries ago, leaving a message for the next chosen. Mary Clare's faith flickered, a spark of purpose, and she tucked the journal into her habit, a promise to carry Gabriel's light forward. The cavern shook, a final tremor, and the well's water rippled, a single hand reaching out, not Lilith's, but Gabriel's, his face serene below the surface. Mary Clare gasped, her heart leaping, but the hand dissolved, a fleeting gift from the well's quiet depths. She stood, her resolve hardening, and turned from the well, the cavern's daylight guiding her toward the surface, her heart offered but unbroken, the seal a testament to her sacrifice. The surface of St. Agatha's convent was a wasteland of ruin, its Gothic spires cracked, its walls collapsed under the storm's relentless assault, now stilled under a grey dawn. Sister Mary Clare emerged from the cavern staircase, her habit tattered, her body bruised but alive, the new journal await against her chest. The well was sealed, Lilith's hunger bound, but the cost was etched in her soul, Gabriel's death, Lucia's sacrifice, Ruth's loss, and the countless sisters claimed by the well's darkness. The air was cold, the sea below a mournful whisper, as if grieving with her. Mary Clare's faith was a quiet strength, her love for Gabriel a fire that warmed her against the convent's desolation. She walked through the rubble, her steps slow, her eyes scanning the wreckage for survivors. The chapel was a skeleton, its crucifix toppled, its altar split, but a faint glow pulsed from the debris, a silver cross, Gabriel's, its surface warm with the martyr's light. She picked it up, her fingers trembling, and clutched it to her heart, a relic of their shared battle. The main hall was silent, its statues shattered, but a soft sob broke the stillness. Mary Clare followed the sound, finding Sister Eleanor, the frail elderly nun, huddled beneath a fallen beam, her face streaked with tears. "You're alive," Eleanor whispered, her eyes wide with awe. "The well, is it gone?" Mary Clare nodded, her voice soft. "It's sealed. Lilith is bound." Eleanor's hand grasped hers, a fragile connection, and Mary Clare helped her stand, their shared survival a spark of hope. The journal in her habit felt heavier, its blank pages a call to record the truth. She thought of Gabriel's journal, Isabel's warnings, and the martyr's sacrifice, each a link in a chain that had bound the well. Her bruise was gone, but its memory lingered, a reminder of Lilith's whisper, "This is not the end." Mary Clare's resolve hardened, a vow to guard the seal, to ensure the well's hunger never woke again. A faint hum came from the ground, not the well's but the convent's, a sigh of release. Mary Clare looked at Eleanor, her voice steady. "We need to leave. This place is no longer holy." They moved toward the cliff's edge, the sea a grey expanse below, and Mary Clare glanced back, the convent's ruins a monument to their sacrifice. The cross in her hand glowed faintly, Gabriel's light a guide, and she stepped forward, the journal a promise to carry their story into the light. The cliff overlooking the Irish Sea was a jagged altar, its edge battered by waves that whispered of eternity. Sister Mary Clare stood with Sister Eleanor, the ruins of St. Agatha's convent behind them, a crumbling testament to their battle against the well. The storm had passed, leaving a grey sky streaked with dawn's light, the air cold but clean, free of Lilith's malice. Mary Clare's habit was torn, her body weary, but the silver cross, Gabriel's relic, glowed faintly in her hand, a spark of his faith that warmed her soul. The new journal, tucked against her chest, was a silent vow to record the truth of their sacrifice. Mary Clare's faith was a steady flame, her love for Gabriel a fire that burned through her grief. She looked at Eleanor, whose frail frame trembled but whose eyes held a quiet strength. "We're the last," Eleanor said, her voice soft. "The others, they didn't make it." Mary Clare nodded, the weight of Lucia, Ruth, Beatrice, and the countless sisters lost to the well a wound that would never heal. "We'll honor them," she said, her voice steady, a promise to carry their memory. The sea below roared, its waves a mournful hymn, and Mary Clare's eyes fell on the cross, its glow pulsing with Gabriel's light. A vision flashed, Gabriel, standing at the well, his hand in hers, his voice chanting with her, their love a martyr's heart that had sealed Lilith's hunger. Her tears fell, but they were not of despair, they were a farewell, a release of the man who'd believed in her. She clutched the journal, its blank pages a canvas for their story, a warning for those who might come after. A faint hum came from the ruins, a sigh from the sealed well, and Mary Clare's heart skipped, the memory of Lilith's whisper, "This is not the end," the shadow that lingered. She looked at Eleanor, her voice firm. "We need to warn others. The well is sealed, but its power remains." Eleanor nodded, her hand gripping Mary Clare's, a bond forged in survival. Mary Clare stepped to the cliff's edge, the cross raised, and whispered a final prayer, Latin words of redemption and peace. The glow flared, a martyr's light that spread across the sea, a beacon against the darkness. The hum faded, and the ruins seemed to settle, a convent at rest but not forgotten. Mary Clare tucked the cross into her habit, beside the journal, and turned from the cliff, Eleanor at her side, their steps a farewell to St. Agatha's, their hearts carrying the weight of a holy silence. The dawn broke over the Irish coast, its light a soft gold that pierced the grey clouds, casting long shadows across the ruins of St. Agatha's convent. Sister Mary Clare and Sister Eleanor walked away from the cliff, their steps slow but steady, the sea's whisper a quiet companion. Mary Clare's habit was a tattered shroud, her body scarred but alive, the silver cross and new journal await against her chest, relics of a battle won at unimaginable cost. The well was sealed, Lilith's hunger bound, but the convent's ruins were a silent warning, their stones etched with the memory of thorns. Mary Clare's faith was a renewed fire, her love for Gabriel a flame that guided her forward. She glanced at Eleanor, whose frail form held a resilience born of survival, her eyes bright with hope. "Where do we go?" Eleanor asked, her voice soft but steady. Mary Clare looked at the horizon, the sea a path to an uncertain future. "To Rome," she said, her voice firm. "The Vatican must know the truth. The well's seal must be guarded." The journal felt warm, its blank pages a call to write their story, Gabriel's faith, Lucia's sacrifice, Ruth's courage, Isabel's redemption, and the martyr's light that had sealed the well. Mary Clare's bruise was gone, but its echo lingered, a reminder of Lilith's final whisper, "This is not the end." She vowed to keep watch, to ensure the well's hunger never woke again, her faith a shield against the darkness. A faint glow pulsed from the cross, Gabriel's light a silent presence, and Mary Clare smiled, her tears dry. She opened the journal, its first page blank but alive, and wrote a single line, "The silence is holy, but its cost is eternal." The words were a promise, a warning, a prayer for those who'd fought and fallen. She closed the journal, tucking it beside the cross, and took Eleanor's hand, their bond a spark of light in the dawn. The ruins of St. Agatha's faded behind them, the seas roar a hymn of closure. Mary Clare's steps were steady, her heart heavy but unbroken, Gabriel's love a martyr's heart that lived in her. The dawn's promise was fragile, the well seal a temporary peace, but Mary Clare carried the truth, a holy silence that would echo through time. As they walked toward the horizon, the convent's ruin stood as a monument to their sacrifice, an act foreclosed with a bittersweet resolution, a world saved but forever marked by the well's shadow.